Hey everyone, I'm Peter Stories here to guide you today. If you use this video to drift off to sleep, please tap like, hit subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now settle in, get cozy, and let yourself relax. The forest had swallowed 6 hours of Ryan's life, and Hannah Chen remained lost somewhere in its depths. His Garmin GPS read 2,847 feet elevation, 3 miles southwest of the Ho River trailhead. The battery indicator blinked at 32%. Ryan pressed the talk button on his Motorola radio, the third time in the past hour. Base, this is Ranger Fletcher, still no visual on the missing hiker, approaching the junction near Mineral Creek Falls. Static answered him. The Olympic rainforest did that. Absorbed radio waves the way moss absorbed water. Everything here absorbed something. The hemlock trees, some 40 feet in circumference, drank centuries. The undergrowth consumed light. And something else, Ryan knew from experience, 3 years old and still raw, consumed whatever wandered too far from the trail. He stopped that thought. Professional distance. SER protocols. Hannah Chen, 24, last seen at 11:47 a.m. by 2 other hikers near the Bogachil River Junction. Brown jacket, blue pack, supposedly experienced. Her parents had driven up from Portland, were waiting at the ranger station with the kind of hope that would curdle into something worse as daylight failed. The Douglas firs here grew so dense their canopy blocked most of the afternoon sun. Ryan checked his watch. 4:23 p.m., maybe 2 hours of decent light remaining. Less under the ceiling of branches. His breath condensed in the air. Temperature had dropped to 47 degrees in the last hour. He found the first sign at 4:31 p.m. A blue thread snagged on Devil's Club thorns, the same shade as the pack description. Ryan bagged it in a Ziploc, marked the coordinates. The shrub grew 15 feet off the maintained trail, in a direction no rational hiker would travel. Devil's Club lived up to its name. Vicious spines covering every surface, painful enough to make grown men cry. Hannah. His voice disappeared into the trees. Hannah Chen. Search and rescue. The forest returned nothing. Not even birds. Ryan noticed that now. The absolute absence of sound except his own breathing and the whisper of wind through needles. He keyed his radio again. Still static. The second sign appeared 12 minutes later. A partial boot print in the mud near a creek tributary. Oboz brand. Women's size 7. Match. But it pointed upstream, toward terrain that rose steeply into old growth where even experienced hikers struggled. Where the maps marked difficult access in red. Where Ryan had lost the Kellerman boy in 2012. No. Different situation. Different forest, technically. That had been in the Quinault Valley section. Different circumstances entirely. The Kellerman case was closed. Declared a tragic accident after 2 weeks of searching turned up nothing but... Ryan shut off that memory before it could fully form. He'd spent 3 years in therapy learning to compartmentalize. 3 years of Dr. Morrison's office in Port Angeles, talking through what he'd heard in those last moments on the radio. The boy's voice, then the other voice, using the boy's voice, except wrong somehow. Stretched, like a recording played at the wrong speed. The creek ran clear and cold, snowmelt from higher elevations. Ryan filled his Nalgene bottle, dropped in a purification tablet. His hands shook slightly. Fatigue, he told himself. 6 hours of scrambling through undergrowth, calling a name that never answered. Hannah! This time something did answer. Help! Ryan's head snapped up. Female voice, distant from upslope. His heart hammered against his ribs. Hannah, keep talking. I'm coming to you. Please. Help me. The voice came from the northeast, where the terrain rose sharply toward a ridgeline. Ryan checked his GPS, marked the position, and started climbing. Sword ferns grabbed at his legs. Nurse logs, some wider than he was tall, blocked his path. He scrambled over them, bark crumbling under his gloves. Keep talking, Hannah. Follow my voice. Silence answered. Ryan climbed for 20 minutes, gaining 300 feet in elevation. The forest changed here. Bigger trees, less undergrowth, the kind of old growth that predated European settlement. Some of these Sitka spruce had stood for 500 years. Hannah, help. I'm lost. Closer now, maybe 50 yards ahead. Ryan pushed forward, his wilderness medical kit banging against his hip. He'd need to check her for hypothermia, injuries, shock. Had his emergency blanket, hand warmers, glucose tabs. Protocol. Focus on protocol. The voice led him to a clearing he didn't remember from his maps. A roughly circular space, perhaps 30 feet across, ringed by ancient hemlocks. The ground was bare except for a carpet of needles. No undergrowth. Nothing grew here. Hannah wasn't there. Hannah, I'm here. The voice came from behind him now. Ryan spun. Nothing but trees and shadows lengthening as the sun dropped lower. Where are you? I can't see you. Here, please. The voice shifted again, now to his left. Ryan's skin prickled. Not from cold. This wasn't echoes. This wasn't acoustics. He knew this pattern. He'd heard it before 3 years ago, when he'd followed the Kellerman boy's voice in circles for 40 minutes before realizing, if this story is gripping you, follow for more quality content. What would you do in Ryan's situation? Share your thoughts. No. He was tired, stressed, projecting trauma onto a normal situation. Hannah was disoriented, moving around, her voice carrying strangely through the trees. That's all. Ryan keyed his radio. Base, this is Fletcher. I have audio contact with the missing hiker but cannot establish visual. Position is... He checked his GPS. The screen showed a blinking cursor with no coordinates, no map, just signal lost. The radio emitted pure static. Hannah, listen to me carefully. Stay where you are and keep talking. I need to locate you by sound. Can you do that? I'm scared. The voice came from directly in front of him now, maybe 20 feet away. But Ryan saw nothing except a massive Sitka spruce, its trunk disappearing into the canopy above. It's okay to be scared. You're going to be fine. I'm Ranger Ryan Fletcher. I'm here to help. Just keep talking to me. Ryan. He froze. She shouldn't know his name. He hadn't given his first name, only his title and last name. How do you know my name, Hannah? Ryan. Help me. Hannah, how do you know my first name? The voice didn't answer. Instead, it changed, deepened slightly, stretched. Ryan Fletcher, you came back. Every instinct Ryan had developed in 8 years as a ranger screamed at him to move. He backed away from the clearing, never taking his eyes off the space where the voice originated. You're not Hannah. We've been waiting. You left last time, before we finished. Ryan's hand found the canister of bear spray on his belt. Useless against what his rational mind refused to acknowledge, but his hand closed around it anyway. Where is she? Where's Hannah Chen? She's here. She's us now. She tasted like citrus and fear. Ryan ran. He crashed through the forest without care for direction, driven purely by the need to put distance between himself and that clearing. Branches whipped his face. He stumbled over roots, caught himself, kept moving. His radio bounced against his chest, spewing static that might have been words if he'd let himself listen. After 10 minutes, his lungs burning, Ryan stopped behind a fallen cedar. He forced himself to breathe quietly, to listen. The forest was silent, completely silent. No wind, no birds, no insects, just his own ragged breathing and the hammer of his pulse in his ears. His GPS remained blank. The radio offered nothing but white noise. Ryan checked his watch, 5:47 p.m. He'd been moving for over an hour since hearing the first call for help, but his watch insisted only 15 minutes had passed since he'd marked the boot print by the creek. No, he was reading it wrong. Stress, adrenaline, his mind playing tricks. He had to get back to the trail, get to a position where his radio would work, call this in. Let the full SR team handle this. Let them bring dogs, helicopters, thermal imaging. Let them find Hannah Chen while he sat in doctor. Morrison's office and explained why he'd abandoned a search. Except he knew what had Hannah. The same thing that had taken the Kellerman boy. The same thing that had spoken to him 3 years ago in a voice that wore the boy's words like a badly fitting mask. Ryan pulled out his topographic map, the waterproof kind that didn't need batteries. He found his last known position, the Mineral Creek Junction. If he headed due west, he'd hit the Hoh River Trail in approximately 2 miles. Downslope, straightforward navigation. He started walking, keeping the setting sun on his right shoulder, using his compass to maintain bearing. The forest remained eerily silent. After 30 minutes, he found the clearing again. Impossible. He'd been heading west, away from where he'd encountered the voice. But here it was, the same circular space, the same ring of ancient hemlocks, the same carpet of needles where nothing grew. Ryan checked his compass. The needle spun lazily, completing full circles pointing nowhere. No. His voice sounded small. No, this isn't real. You're messing with my head. Ryan Fletcher. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. You understand now. What you really found in the Quinault Valley. What found you? Where is Hannah? She's close. She's inside now, feeding us. Such lovely memories she had. Her father teaching her to hike. Her sister's wedding. Her first kiss behind a 7-Eleven in Beaverton. Ryan's stomach churned. Let her go. Why? You left the boy. You ran away. You let us finish. I looked for him. I looked for 3 days. You heard him calling, just like now, and you stopped answering. You knew. Ryan had. On the 3rd day, after 48 hours of searching, when he'd heard the Kellerman boy's voice coming from impossible directions, saying things no 8-year-old would say, he'd stopped responding. He'd called off his personal search, let the official teams continue while he stayed back at the station. Everyone assumed trauma, exhaustion, breakdown. No one blamed him. The boy was never found. What are you? The voice laughed, a sound like wind through hollow trees. We're what remains. When the forest digests, we're the echo in the rot, the memory in the mycelium. We were human once. Many humans. Many times ago. A shape materialized in the clearing. Hannah Chen or something wearing her appearance. She stood in the center of the needle carpet, perfectly still, her brown jacket pristine despite hours in the forest. Her eyes were wrong, too dark, too deep, like looking into wells. Ryan. Hannah's mouth moved, but the voice came from behind him, in front of him, from inside his own head. Come closer. Let us taste you. You're different from her. You already know what we are. Your fear is so much richer. Ryan pulled out his bear spray, knowing how useless it was. Stay back. The Hannah thing tilted its head. We don't need to move. You'll come to us. They always do. The forest is ours. Has been ours for longer than your language has words for time. Ryan backed away, maintaining eye contact with the thing. His heel caught on a root. He stumbled, caught himself against a tree trunk. The bark felt strange under his palm, soft, almost spongy, like flesh. He jerked his hand away. The tree was normal, solid, rough bark. You're in my head. Get out. We're always in your head, since the Quinault Valley. You've carried us, a little piece, growing. You didn't think those nightmares were just nightmares, did you? Ryan's therapy sessions flashed through his mind. Dr. Morrison prescribing sleep aids. The dreams of the Kellerman boy, decomposing but still calling his name. Waking up certain something was in his bedroom, just out of sight. That's not real. You're not real. You're my stress, my guilt manifesting. Then why can't you leave the clearing, Ryan Fletcher? He ran again, straight toward where he knew the trail must be. Due west. He had the sun. He had his training. He had the clearing. Again. Ryan screamed. frustration and terror mixing into something primal. He grabbed his radio, mashed the talk button. "Base! Anyone! I need immediate extraction. I'm compromised. The missing hiker is..." "Ryan." His own mother's voice came from the radio. "Ryan, honey, come home. I made your favorite." His mother had been dead for 6 years. He threw the radio. It landed in the center of the clearing, near the Hannah thing's feet. She bent down, picked it up, brought it to her ear. "Such interesting sounds you make. Such terror in them. Like music." Ryan's fingers found his personal cell phone in his jacket pocket. No signal, obviously, not this deep in the park, but it had one important feature: a flashlight, and his spare battery pack, and a compass app that didn't rely on magnetic north. He pulled it out. The screen showed 6:34 p.m., which couldn't be right. That meant time was moving correctly, which meant he'd been trapped in this space for over 40 minutes. The GPS app tried to load, failed, tried again. A blue dot appeared on a blank screen, then another blue dot, 2 inches away from the first, then another, and another. A cluster of blue dots all showing his location, all in slightly different positions as if he existed in multiple places simultaneously. "You're showing me what you want me to see," Ryan said, trying to steady his voice. "The forest isn't doing this. You are. You're in my head, making me perceive..." "Is there a difference?" The Hannah thing smiled. "Perception is reality. You taught us that. With your fear, your guilt, your delicious awareness that you failed." "I didn't fail. I looked for him." "But you didn't find him. You left him with us, and now we're so much stronger. We learned from him, learned about fear, about mothers, about SpongeBob SquarePants and Lego Star Wars, and how a child's mind tastes different than an adult's, like so sweet, so pure." Ryan felt tears on his face. Is the boy still? "There's no boy anymore. Just us. Just echoes. Would you like to hear him?" "No." "Ryan." The Kellerman boy's voice, high and terrified. "Ryan, help! It hurts! Why won't you help me? Stop it! Or would you prefer your mother?" Her voice again from the radio lying in the needles. "Ryan, honey, why didn't you visit me in the hospital? I called for you. You never came." Ryan had been at a training conference. He'd missed his mother's death by 6 hours. 6 hours he'd spent in a hotel conference room learning advanced wilderness first aid while she coded in a hospital bed, alone. "You're using my memories against me. You're parasitic. You feed on..." Understanding hit him like cold water. The entity wasn't physical. It was something else. Something that existed in the space between perception and reality. It fed on consciousness, on awareness, on the specific frequency of human terror and guilt. It had been here in this forest for how long? Centuries? Millennia? Feeding on lost hikers, lost children, accumulating their memories, their fears, their final moments. And 3 years ago, when Ryan had responded to the Kellerman boy's voice and heard it distort into something else, the entity had tasted him, had gotten inside his head, had been growing there ever since, fed by his nightmares, his guilt, his sessions with Dr. Morrison where he'd described in clinical detail every horrible possibility. "You're not in the forest," Ryan said. "Not really. You're in me." The Hannah thing smiled wider. Her mouth opened too far, showed too many teeth. "Finally, you understand? We're not separate. Haven't been since the kino. We've been eating you slowly, and you've been feeding us so well. And Hannah? Is she real?" "She's real. She's here. She walked off the trail 6 hours ago because she heard her sister calling, and now she's ours too, somewhere in the forest, becoming like you're becoming." Ryan's hands shook. If this entity was partially inside his head, feeding on his fear, growing stronger from his awareness of it, then the traditional response, running, fighting, resisting, only fed it more. Every moment of terror was a meal. Every nightmare strengthened it. The therapy had been wrong. Dr. Morrison's approach of facing his fears, processing his trauma, examining every detail. That had been fertilizer for this thing. Every session had fed it. Ryan needed to do the opposite. He sat down in the clearing, 20 feet from the thing wearing Hannah Chen's face. He closed his eyes. "What are you doing?" The entity's voice lost some of its confidence. Ryan breathed. In for 4 counts. Hold for 4. Out for 4. The technique Dr. Morrison had taught him for panic attacks. Except now he used it differently. He breathed and pushed away the fear, not suppressing it. That would just create more pressure. He acknowledged it, then let it flow past him, through him. "Ryan Fletcher, you can't ignore us, and we're inside you." He thought about his mother, not her death, not his guilt about missing her final hours. He thought about teaching him to identify trees when he was 7, her hands, calloused and gentle, breaking off a hemlock branch to show him the flat needles, the way she'd smelled like coffee and wood smoke. The memory had no fear in it, just love, just nostalgia, nothing for the entity to feed on. "Stop." The voice wavered. Ryan thought about the Kellerman boy, not his disappearance, not the terrible things that might have happened. He thought about the boy's intake photo, gap-toothed smile, wearing a Pokemon t-shirt. How he'd probably been excited about the camping trip. How his parents had described him as obsessed with bugs, always collecting beetles and spiders in jars. A life. A real life. Not defined by its ending. "You're killing us." The Hannah thing's voice distorted, stretched. Ryan opened his eyes. The clearing was changing. The hemlocks seemed less substantial, their trunks almost transparent. The needle carpet was fading. The entity itself was starving. It had grown strong on Ryan's guilt and terror, had used those emotions to create this psychological cage. But without his fear to feed it, to make it real, it was collapsing. "You're not a monster," Ryan said quietly. "You're trauma. You're the part of me that can't forgive myself. You're every what if and if only I've carried for 3 years. You're real because I made you real. We're more than you." But the voice was fading, becoming hollow. Maybe you were something once, something that found me when I was vulnerable. But I've been feeding you, my guilt, my nightmares, my inability to accept that I did everything I could for that boy. I've been the host, and you've been the parasite." Ryan stood. The clearing was almost gone now, the trees snapping back into their normal positions. He could hear actual sounds, a woodpecker in the distance, the rush of water over rocks. His radio crackled. "Fletcher, this is base. Do you copy? We've got your position on GPS. What's your status?" Ryan grabbed the radio. "Base, I copy. He took a breath. "I need to resume search for Hannah Chen. 6 hours missing. Last known direction northeast of Mineral Creek Junction." "Copy that. Additional units are en route. Sunsets in 43 minutes. "Understood. Fletcher out." He checked his GPS. Coordinates appeared. 47 to 51, 22 N, 123 to 56, 18 W. He was exactly where he should be, 3 miles from the trailhead, on the north slope of the ridge. His compass pointed steadily north, and ahead, perhaps 50 yards through the trees, he saw a flash of blue. A backpack. Ryan moved quickly, professionally, pushing through the undergrowth. He found Hannah Chen sitting against a Douglas fir, conscious but disoriented, her left ankle swollen. "Hannah, I'm Ranger Ryan Fletcher. Are you injured?" She looked up at him with normal eyes, frightened but present. I got lost. I heard my sister calling me, but that doesn't make sense. She's in Portland. I followed the voice and fell. My ankle. It's okay. You're safe now. Let me check you out." As Ryan administered first aid, called in the location, prepared Hannah for extraction, he felt something shift in his mind. A presence that had been there for 3 years, subtle but constant, finally released its grip. The Kellerman boy was gone. Had been gone for 3 years. Ryan had searched for him, had done everything right, and sometimes people got lost in the wilderness and never came home. That was the terrible truth of his job. He couldn't save everyone, couldn't prevent every tragedy. That didn't make him a monster. It made him human. The SAR team arrived 30 minutes later, just as full dark settled over the forest. They loaded Hannah onto a litter, started the careful descent back to the trailhead. Ryan walked behind them, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. At one point, he thought he heard something. A voice, distant, calling his name. But it was just the wind through the trees. Just the forest being a forest. He didn't look back. Thanks for reading to the end. If you enjoyed this narrative, consider following for more engaging stories. What's your interpretation of Hannah's fate? I'd love to read your theories in the comments. Olympic National Park Ranger Report, October 15, 2015. Missing hiker. Hannah Chen located and extracted with minor injuries. Ranger Fletcher commended for persistence in difficult search conditions. Psychological evaluation recommended, but declined. Fletcher stated he felt better than I have in years and requested to continue active duty. Hannah Chen recovered fully and returned to hiking. She never spoke publicly about what she heard in the forest that day. Ryan Fletcher continued his work at Olympic National Park for another 7 years before retiring. He never experienced another incident like the one in 2012 or 2015. When asked about those cases in his exit interview, he said simply, "Sometimes the worst monsters are the ones we create ourselves, and sometimes you have to stop feeding them." The call came through at 6:52 a.m., breaking the pre-dawn silence of the ranger station with its electronic trill. Christopher had been awake for 20 minutes already, nursing his second coffee and watching fog roll through the Douglas firs outside the window. The steam from his mug formed ephemeral patterns against the glass, shapes that reminded him of his daughter's drawings, all circles and swooping lines. Olympic Station 4, this is dispatch. The voice belonged to Marie, 10 years behind the desk, unflappable. Her tone now carried an edge that made Christopher set down his mug. "We've got a possible lost hiker on the Enchanted Valley Trail. Female, 26, solo. Last contact 6:47 via text. Family's on the line and they're..." A pause. "They're scared, Chris." Christopher reached for his Motorola, already standing. Through the window, the October morning looked like pewter. Details? Sarah Mitchell, experienced hiker according to her brother. Started the trail yesterday at 2 p.m. from Graves Creek. Sent a text this morning saying she could hear someone calling her name. Wanted to check if any other rangers were in the area. Nothing since. The coffee sat heavy in Christopher's stomach. Enchanted Valley Trail, 13 miles one way, elevation gain of 1,800 feet, running parallel to the Quinault River through old-growth forest so dense that the canopy turned midday into dusk. Beautiful country, the kind of beautiful that swallowed people. "I'm mobilizing now," Christopher said, his mind already running through protocols. "Contact the Quinault station. See if they had anyone on that trail yesterday or this morning. Anne Marie? Get me everything from her phone. Last known coordinates, battery status, anything. Already sent to your email. Chris?" Marie's voice dropped. The brother said she sounded strange in that last text, said the voice calling her name sounded like their mother. Their mother's been dead 3 years. Christopher felt something shift in his chest. Not fear exactly, but a recognition. He'd worked Olympic for 8 years. He knew its moods, its patterns, the way weather systems rolled in from the Pacific and turned trails into gauntlets. He also knew the stories, though he'd never given them much weight. The Enchanted Valley locals called it the Hollow, a stretch of forest where sounds behaved strangely, where hikers reported hearing voices, where the disoriented seemed to wander in circles even with functioning compasses. "Log it all," Christopher said. "I'll be on the trail in 30. He ended the call and immediately opened his phone, pulling up the family photo he'd taken last weekend. His wife Rebecca, hair pulled back, laughing at something their daughter Emma had said. Emma herself, 8 years old, holding up a pine cone like a trophy. They'd hiked the Spruce Nature Trail together, easy and close to home, and Emma had collected 17 pine cones, counting each one aloud with the seriousness she brought to everything. Christopher had promised to help her paint them when he got back tonight. He sent Rebecca a quick text. Early call-out. Lost hiker. Should be back by dinner. Love you both. The reply came instantly. Rebecca was an early riser too, probably already making Emma's lunch. Be safe, we love you, bring her home. 3 words that crystallized everything. Bring her home. Someone's daughter, someone's sister. 26 years old, out there alone, hearing voices in the forest. Christopher pulled on his gear with practiced efficiency. Sitka jacket, first light pants, Salomon boots already broken in from 100 trails. He packed his osprey with systematic precision. First aid kit, emergency bivouac, water purification tablets, high-calorie bars, headlamp with extra batteries, Garmin GPS unit, emergency beacon, rope, compass, redundancy built on redundancy. His Benchmade knife clipped to his belt, radio on his chest strap. Outside, his Ford F-250 sat waiting, the Ranger Service emblem on the door barely visible in the pre-dawn murk. The drive to Graves Creek trailhead would take 45 minutes on winding mountain roads. Christopher used the time to review what he knew. Sarah Mitchell, 26, solo hiker. Last text at 6:47 a.m. Someone's calling my name. Sounds like Mom. Any rangers on the Northern Loop? The Northern Loop branched off Enchanted Valley around mile 8, a less maintained spur that connected to a series of old logging roads from the 1940s. Most hikers missed it entirely, following the main trail toward the valley floor. But if Sarah had gone looking for the source of that voice, Christopher's fingers drummed against the steering wheel. The Kenote River would be running high after last week's rain, 18.3 feet according to the USGS gauge, well above the seasonal average of 14.2. Crossings that were manageable in summer became deadly in October. The temperature had dropped to 42 degrees overnight. If Sarah was injured, immobile, hypothermia became the primary concern. The golden window for finding lost hikers alive was 72 hours. Sarah was approaching 11 hours since her last check-in. The math was brutal and simple. The trailhead parking lot held only Sarah's vehicle when Christopher arrived. A blue Honda CR-V with Oregon plates and a Keep Tahoe Blue sticker on the bumper. He noted the license plate in his log, 487 KJM. The car was locked, nothing visible through the windows except a road atlas folded open to Washington State. Christopher keyed his radio. Station 4, this is Ranger Mitchell on scene at Graves Creek. 1 vehicle in lot, matches the description. Beginning search at 0742 hours. Copy that, Chris. Weather update, front moving in. Rain expected by 1400 hours. Wind 15 to 20 knots. Understood. I'll radio every 30 minutes. The trail began innocuously enough. Wide and maintained, marked by a wooden Forest Service sign that listed distances in white letters. Christopher moved at his standard search pace, faster than recreational hiking, but sustainable for hours. His eyes scanned continuously, reading the forest for signs. Disturbed vegetation, footprints in mud, broken branches at human height. The morning light filtered through old-growth canopy in discrete shafts, illuminating motes of pollen and moisture. Hemlock, Douglas fir, and western red cedar rose like cathedral columns, some with trunks 8 feet across, survivors of fires that had burned when this continent had different names. Nurse logs, fallen giants slowly composing into soil, supported entire ecosystems of ferns, mushrooms, and seedling trees. Beautiful, indifferent, old beyond reckoning. At mile 2, Christopher found the first sign, a partial boot print in soft mud beside the trail, the distinctive lug pattern of a Merrill Moab, women's size 7 or 8. Fresh, the edges hadn't collapsed yet from moisture. Sarah had come this way. He photographed it with his phone, noting the timestamp and location coordinates, then continued. The Kenote River ran parallel to the trail here, its voice a constant white roar filtered through trees. Christopher stopped every quarter mile to call out, "Sarah! Sarah Mitchell, Forest Service, if you can hear me, make noise." His voice disappeared into the forest, swallowed by the river's rumble and the sound-dampening effect of dense vegetation. No response. Mile 4 brought the first crossing, a wooden bridge over Pyrites Creek, water running clear and fast over rounded stones. Christopher checked the structure automatically, testing the handrails. Solid. But on the far side, something caught his attention. Fresh gouges in the wood. 4 parallel lines like fingernails had scraped hard. He knelt, examining them. The wood was pale where it had been exposed, no weathering. Recent. But the marks were too deep, too clean. More like something had been carved deliberately than scraped in passing. Christopher stood, feeling the forest pressing closer. The sound of Pyrites Creek seemed louder now, a rushing that filled his ears with white noise. "Sarah," he called again. "Sarah Mitchell." Nothing. But then, maybe, a sound that wasn't water. A voice, distant, indistinct, coming from ahead on the trail. Christopher moved faster. Se esta história está prendendo sua atenção, siga para mais conteúdo de qualidade. O que você faria na situação de Christopher? Compartilhe sua opinião. Mile 6. The trail climbed now, switchbacking through a stand of hemlock so dense that the temperature dropped 5 degrees in the shade. Christopher's breath formed brief clouds. His calves burned from the grade, but he maintained his pace, checking his GPS every few minutes. The device showed his position as a blue dot tracking along the red line of the trail. Except the blue dot kept jumping. Small movements, 10 or 15 feet, corrections that didn't match his actual location. GPS errors were common in heavy canopy, but Christopher's Garmin was usually reliable to within 20 feet. He stopped at a switchback, pulling out his map and compass. Old-school navigation, the kind that didn't depend on satellites. The compass needle swung lazily, settled, then swung again. Northeast, then east, then northeast again, unable to find magnetic north with any certainty. Christopher felt his pulse quicken. He held the compass away from his body, away from any metal that might interfere. The needle continued its indecisive dance. "Station 4, this is Ranger Mitchell." He kept his voice level. "I'm at approximately mile 6 on Enchanted Valley Trail, experiencing navigation equipment anomalies, GPS jumping, compass unreliable, continuing on trail markers and map. Over." Static hissed from his radio. Then Marie's voice emerged, fractured. "Copy. Chris, interference, call back, 30. More static, then nothing. Christopher tried again. "Station 4, do you copy?" The radio offered only white noise, rhythmic and almost hypnotic like breathing. He switched it off, then on again. Same result. The battery indicator showed full charge. Equipment malfunction? Solar flares could affect electronics, though he'd heard no warnings. Or maybe something about the geology here. Olympic had pockets of magnetic anomaly, ancient basalt formations that did strange things to compasses. Or maybe something else. Christopher pushed the thought away. Rationality was a tool, sharp and necessary. Whatever was affecting his equipment, Sarah was still out here, still in danger, still needing rescue. That was the only thing that mattered. He continued upward. At mile 7, the trail opened into a small meadow, maybe 50 feet across, carpeted in yellowing grass. The sudden openness felt aggressive after the claustrophobic press of forest. Christopher stopped at the edge, scanning. In the center of the meadow stood a western red cedar, singular and ancient, its trunk spiraling upward in a corkscrew pattern that suggested centuries of growth. The tree's bark had been marked, carved, with symbols Christopher didn't recognize. Not graffiti, nothing modern. The cuts were weathered, years or decades old, and they formed patterns that might have been language, or might have been decoration. Circles within circles, lines radiating outward, something that looked almost like a face or the suggestion of one. Christopher approached slowly. Around the tree's base, the grass had been compressed in a circle, as if someone had walked around and around, pacing the same circuit until the vegetation died. How many rotations would that take? Hundreds? Thousands? On the tree's north side, he found what he'd been dreading and hoping for. A scrap of purple fabric, caught on a piece of protruding bark. Sarah's brother had said she'd been wearing a purple North Face jacket. Christopher photographed it, then carefully removed it with tweezers from his first aid kit, sealing it in a plastic bag. Evidence, proof of passage. Sarah! His voice cracked the meadow's silence. Sarah Mitchell, can you hear me? The forest answered with something that wasn't quite an echo. The word came back wrong, distorted. Hear me. Christopher's skin prickled. Acoustic anomalies. The meadow's shape could create strange reflections, sound waves bouncing off the surrounding trees in unexpected patterns. That was all. Science, not superstition. But the voice that came next wasn't an echo. Christopher. His name, spoken clearly, from the forest on the meadow's far side. A woman's voice, familiar in a way that made his stomach drop. Christopher, honey, I need you. Rebecca. His wife's voice, her exact inflection, the way she said his name when something was wrong, when Emma was sick or the water heater had broken or she'd gotten bad news about her father's health. Christopher's hand moved to his radio before conscious thought, but he stopped. The radio was dead, and Rebecca was 90 miles away in Port Angeles, probably dropping Emma at school right now, navigating the morning carpool with practiced efficiency. Christopher, please. I'm lost. I can't find the way back. He stood frozen, rational mind warring with something deeper, more primitive. Every instinct screamed that this was wrong, impossible. But the voice was perfect. Every vocal quirk, every subtle modulation. Either this was Rebecca, somehow transported here through means he couldn't comprehend, or something was using her voice with flawless precision. Where are you? Christopher heard himself say, hating the question even as he asked it. I don't know. It's dark. Christopher, I'm scared. The voice was coming from the Northern Trail Junction, the unmaintained spur that Sarah had asked about in her text. The path that supposedly led to old logging roads and abandoned camps. The path that locals warned against, though no one could quite articulate why. Christopher forced his breathing to slow, forced himself to think. This was the entity, the thing. Whatever had taken Sarah, whatever had been calling her name in her mother's voice. Now it was using Rebecca's voice on him, which meant Sarah might still be alive. The thing was still hunting. I'm coming, Christopher said, his voice steady. Stay where you are. Keep talking so I can find you. Hurry, please hurry, it's so cold. Christopher entered the Northern Trail with his knife in hand, every sense hyper-alert. The path was narrow, overgrown, marked only by the occasional faded blaze on tree trunks. The canopy closed overhead, reducing the gray morning light to underwater dimness. The voice continued to call, always ahead, always just out of sight. Christopher, this way, I see a light. I think it's the way out. He followed, marking trees with his knife as he went, cutting fresh blazes to ensure he could find his way back. The professional part of his mind was still functioning, still documenting. Trail condition deteriorating, windfall blocking path at multiple points, evidence of significant disuse. But another part of his mind was unraveling, processing the impossible. The voice was too perfect. Whatever was creating it had access to his memories, his experiences, his understanding of how Rebecca spoke. It knew things only he should know. The thought crystallized like ice. This entity read minds. It fed on thoughts, on memories, on the most intimate knowledge a person possessed. That's why it was so effective. That's why people followed it deeper and deeper into the forest, chasing the voices of the dead or distant, until they were lost beyond recovery. Sarah had heard her mother. Christopher was hearing his wife. The entity adapted to its prey, using their own minds against them. Almost there, honey. I can see you now. The trail opened into a ravine, steep-sided and choked with devil's club and salmonberry. At the bottom, perhaps 40 feet down, water ran in a narrow channel, a tributary of the Canoe. And on the far side, barely visible through undergrowth, a structure. Christopher stopped at the ravine's edge, peering down. The structure was old, very old. Rough-hewn logs forming walls, a collapsed roof, remnants of what might have been a logging camp from the 1940s. Moss covered everything. Trees grew through what had been the floor, and in the doorway, A figure. For one moment, one terrible, disorienting moment, Christopher saw Rebecca. Her face, her posture, her exact height and build. She raised one hand, beckoning. Then his rational mind reasserted itself like a physical shock. Rebecca was in Port Angeles. This was not her. Could not be her. The figure remained, but Christopher forced himself to see what was actually there. Not his wife, but a suggestion of human shape, a configuration of shadows and light that his desperate brain had tried to resolve into someone familiar. The harder he looked, the less solid it became. Christopher. The voice was changing now, losing its coherence. Help me. Help. 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 The word degraded into a sound that wasn't language, a vocalization that set his teeth on edge. And then he heard it. Underneath the false voice, beneath the mimicry, another sound. Crying, human crying, weak and hoarse. "Sarah!" Christopher shouted. "Sarah Mitchell, I'm a ranger, I'm here to help." The crying stopped. Then, faintly, "Help. Please." It won't stop talking. The voice came from the structure. Sarah was in there, alive but trapped, with this thing that wore voices like masks. Christopher didn't hesitate. He'd made his choice the moment he'd called Rebecca's name back in the meadow. He'd known this was a trap, but he'd walked into it anyway, because that's what the job required. Bring her home. He descended into the ravine, using roots and rocks for handholds, moving as quickly as safety allowed. The Devil's Club tore at his jacket, its spines designed by evolution to deter exactly this kind of passage. He ignored the pain, focused on the goal. The water at the bottom ran ankle-deep and cold enough to penetrate his boots instantly. Christopher splashed through it, climbed the far bank, pushed through the undergrowth to the structure. Inside, Sarah Mitchell sat with her back against the wall, knees drawn up, arms wrapped around herself. Her purple jacket was torn, her face scratched by branches. But she was alive, conscious, looking at him with eyes that held terror and hope in equal measure. "Don't listen to it," she said immediately. "Whatever it says, don't listen. It sounds like everyone you've ever loved." Christopher knelt beside her, already assessing. No obvious injuries beyond superficial cuts. Mild hypothermia likely, given her shivering. Dehydrated definitely. "I'm Ranger Christopher Mitchell. I'm getting you out of here. Can you walk?" "I think so. I've been here since yesterday. I followed." She stopped, swallowed. "I followed my mom's voice. I knew she was dead. I knew it wasn't real, but it sounded so much like her." "I know," Christopher said, helping her to her feet. "It used my wife's voice on me. But that's all it can do. Trick us. It doesn't have power beyond that." Even as he said it, Christopher wondered if it was true. The compass failures, the GPS jumping, the radio static, those were more than mental tricks. The entity had some capacity to affect the physical world, but it hadn't touched them, hadn't physically harmed them. Maybe it couldn't. Maybe its power was purely psychological. They needed to leave, now. Christopher supported Sarah with one arm, guiding her out of the structure. The afternoon light, such as it was, seemed brighter after the shelter's darkness. He checked his watch, 1:23 p.m. Hours had passed in what felt like minutes. "We're going back the way I came," he said. "I marked the trail. We stay together, no matter what we hear. Understood?" Sarah nodded. "Will it follow us?" "Probably, but we're not listening anymore." They crossed the stream, climbed out of the ravine. Christopher moved steadily, supporting Sarah when she stumbled, maintaining a pace that balanced speed with safety. His knife blazes showed clear on the trees, a path of fresh cuts leading back toward the meadow. The voices started almost immediately. "Christopher, wait. I fell. I need help." Rebecca's voice, frantic from somewhere behind them. "Sarah, honey, where are you going?" A man's voice, older, with Sarah's same Pacific Northwest accent. Her father, maybe. Or a grandfather. "Don't leave me here." A child's voice now, Emma's voice, 8 years old and terrified. "Daddy, please." Christopher's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. Beside him, Sarah was crying silently, but she kept moving. "It's not real," Christopher said, as much to himself as to her. None of it is real. I know, Sarah whispered. But it sounds so real. The voices multiplied, overlapping, creating a chorus of desperate pleas and accusations. Every person Christopher had ever loved. Everyone Sarah had ever lost. The entity was pulling from their memories with ruthless efficiency, using their own minds as weapons. But Christopher had one advantage. He'd expected this. He'd walked into the trap knowing what it was, and that knowledge, thin as it seemed against the emotional onslaught, was enough. They reached the meadow with the carved cedar. The tree stood exactly as before, but now Christopher could see it for what it was, a marker, a warning. The symbols carved into its bark weren't decoration. They were documentation. Some previous generation had encountered this thing and left a record. How many people had disappeared here over the decades? How many voices did the entity collect? Sarah stopped at the meadow's edge, looking back toward the forest they'd escaped. Do you think it's always been here? I don't know, Christopher said honestly. But right now I don't care. We need to keep moving. They crossed the meadow. The voices followed but grew quieter, as if the entity's power diminished with distance from its source. By the time they reached mile 4, the voices had faded to whispers. By mile 2, silence. Christopher's radio crackled to life at mile 1. Station 4 to Ranger Mitchell. Chris, do you copy? We've lost contact for over 5 hours. Respond. Christopher grabbed the radio, feeling its solidity like an anchor. This is Ranger Mitchell. I copy. I have Sarah Mitchell with me. She's ambulatory but needs medical attention. ETA to Trailhead 20 minutes. Marie's voice came back immediately. Professional relief evident in every word. Copy that. We have paramedics standing by. Good work, Chris. The trailhead appeared ahead. The parking lot. Sarah's CRV. And now an ambulance. Its red and white bulk impossibly mundane after hours in the forest's timeless maze. Paramedics swarmed forward, taking Sarah from Christopher's support with practiced efficiency. Vitals checked, blanket wrapped, IV started. Christopher watched it all from a slight distance, filling out his incident report on automatic, his hands moving while his mind struggled to process what had happened. Sarah looked back at him from the ambulance's open doors. Thank you, she said simply. You saved my life. Christopher nodded. He wanted to say something profound, something that acknowledged what they'd survived together, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he said, "Get some rest. You're safe now." The ambulance doors closed. The vehicle pulled away, its lights flashing but sirens silent. Marie appeared at Christopher's elbow, holding a thermos of coffee. You look like hell. Feel like it too. He accepted the coffee gratefully, letting its heat seep into his hands. The trail's dangerous, Marie. The northern junction especially. We need to close it. Put up warning signs. What happened out there? Christopher considered lying, offering some sanitized version about acoustic anomalies and natural disorientation. But Marie had been doing this job longer than he had. She deserved the truth. Something's in those woods. I don't know what it is. Maybe some kind of psychological phenomenon, maybe something else. But it uses voices, it mimics people, convinces hikers to follow it deeper into the forest. Sarah heard her dead mother. I heard... He stopped. I heard Rebecca. Marie's expression didn't change. She just nodded slowly. The Hollow. We've had 7 disappearances on that trail in 15 years. 3 bodies never recovered. I always thought it was just bad luck. Steep terrain, easy to get lost. But you're saying there's a pattern. I'm saying there's something deliberate. Whether it's natural or supernatural, I don't know, but it's dangerous. I'll talk to the district ranger. Get the northern junction officially closed. Marie paused. You should go home, Chris. See your family. The word family hit Christopher like a physical blow. Rebecca, Emma. He pulled out his phone. 5:47 p.m. Dozens of missed calls and texts. His hands shook as he opened the messages. Rebecca. Chris, you okay? Haven't heard from you. Rebecca. Getting worried. Call me when you can. Rebecca. Chris, it's 4 p.m. Emma's asking about you. Please call. Rebecca. Calling the station. Marie says you're on an extended search. Please be safe. The last message sent 10 minutes ago. I love you. Come home. Christopher called immediately. Rebecca answered on the first ring. Chris, thank God. Are you okay? Her voice, her real voice coming through digital transmission from 90 miles away, sounded nothing like what he'd heard in the forest. How had he ever thought the mimicry was perfect? This voice carried the weight of 8 years of marriage, a shared life, real history. The false voice had been hollow, empty of everything that made Rebecca herself. I'm okay. I'm coming home. Is Emma there? Right here. She's been worried sick. Here, talk to her. A pause, then Emma's voice breathless and young. Daddy? Did you find the lost person? I did, sweetheart. She's safe. Good, I was scared. I thought maybe you got lost too. Christopher closed his eyes, feeling tears threaten for the first time all day. I couldn't get lost. I had to come home to you and Mom. I promised to help you paint pine cones, remember? Emma's laugh clear as bells. You remembered. Always. I'll be home in 2 hours. We can paint them before dinner. Okay. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, Emma. More than anything. He handed the phone back to Rebecca, exchanged a few more words, reassurances, promises, the small necessary lies that relationships required. No, I wasn't in real danger. Yes, just a routine search. Then he ended the call and stood in the parking lot watching the sun set behind the mountains. Marie appeared again, her own day's work done. Go on, get out of here. Christopher nodded, climbed into his truck. The engine started with its familiar rumble. He pulled out of the lot, leaving the forest behind. But in his rearview mirror he could see the trees, dark and endless, holding their secrets close. Somewhere in those woods, the entity still waited. Still called with stolen voices, still hunted. Christopher thought about all the missing persons cases, the cold files, the families who never got closure. How many of them had followed voices into the hollow? How many were still out there, lost beyond recovery? He couldn't save them, but he'd saved Sarah. That was enough. It had to be enough. The drive home passed in a blur of familiar roads and gathering darkness. Christopher's mind felt fractured, divided between the mundane world of speed limits and traffic signals and the other world he'd witnessed, where voices called from the forest's heart. His house appeared like a lighthouse, windows glowing warm against the evening. Rebecca's car in the driveway, Emma's bike lying on the lawn where she'd abandoned it. Home. Christopher sat in his truck for a moment, just looking, remembering how the false Rebecca had beckoned from the ravine's edge. The entity had known exactly what to offer him, his family, threatened and in need. It had weaponized the thing he loved most. But it had miscalculated, because his love for Rebecca and Emma wasn't weakness. It was strength. It was the reason he'd walked into the trap knowing it was a trap, the reason he'd resisted the voices, the reason he was sitting here now, alive and whole. The front door opened. Emma burst out, running across the lawn with her arms spread wide. Christopher climbed from the truck and caught her, lifting her up, holding her tight. You're home, Emma said, squeezing his neck. Mom said you were being a hero, just doing my job, Christopher said, but his voice was rough. Rebecca emerged from the house wrapped in a cardigan against the evening chill. She walked to them slowly, searching Christopher's face with the intimate knowledge of years together. Whatever she saw there made her stop, made her eyes widen. Chris? I'm okay, he said. Really, just glad to be home. She held his gaze a moment longer, then nodded. Emma's been guarding the pine cones all day. She set up a whole painting station in the kitchen. Then we'd better get started, Christopher said, setting Emma down. Can't keep the pine cones waiting. They walked inside together, Christopher, Rebecca, and Emma, into the warm light and ordinary chaos of their life. Dinner needed making, homework needed checking, pine cones needed painting, The rhythms of family, mundane and essential. But later, after Emma was asleep and Rebecca dozed on the couch, Christopher stood at the window looking out at the darkness. The forest was out there, miles away but present in his mind. The carved cedar, the abandoned structure, the entity that wore voices like masks. He thought about the symbols carved into the tree, the warning left by someone who'd survived an encounter. Maybe he should go back, document those symbols, try to understand their meaning, add his own warning for future rangers. Or maybe some things were better left alone. Maybe the best he could do was close the trail, post warnings, and hope people listened. Christopher turned away from the window. Rebecca stirred on the couch, opened her eyes. "Come to bed," she said softly. "In a minute." But he stayed at the window, keeping watch, until the first light of morning crept over the mountains. Thank you for reading to the end. If you appreciated this narrative, consider following for more engaging stories. What's your interpretation of Sarah's fate? I'd love to read your theories in the comments. William's phone buzzed against the wooden desk at 6:47 a.m., the vibration rattling his half-empty coffee mug. The ranger station at the Hoh Rainforest Visitor Center still smelled of yesterday's burned popcorn and wet Gore-Tex. He'd been awake since 5, updating trail condition reports and pretending the dreams hadn't followed him into another morning. "Ranger Hutchins," he answered, already pulling his incident notebook closer. The woman's voice came through fractured with static and something worse. The kind of controlled panic that came from someone forcing themselves not to scream. "My daughter didn't come back. Hannah Shepard. She went out yesterday afternoon on the Hoh River Trail and she always checks in. Always. It's been 18 hours. William's pen stopped mid-movement. 18 hours in September, with the temperatures dropping into the 40s at night. "Ma'am, I need you to slow down. Where are you right now?" "The parking lot. The visitor center parking lot. I drove up from Forks when she didn't answer her phone." He was already pulling on his jacket, a Carhartt that had seen 12 seasons in Olympic. "I'll be there in 3 minutes. Don't go anywhere." The morning light filtered through western hemlock and Sitka spruce in diffused bars. The forest perpetually caught between day and something older. William's boots hit gravel as he crossed from the station to the main lot. A silver Honda Civic sat near the trailhead kiosk, a woman in her 50s leaning against it like the vehicle was the only thing keeping her upright. "Mrs. Shepard?" William kept his voice level, professional. "I'm Ranger Hutchins. Tell me everything about yesterday." She clutched a photo, a young woman, maybe 23, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing a smile that suggested she'd just said something funny. "Hannah, she's a graduate student at UW studying fungal ecology. She comes up here every few weeks to collect samples. Yesterday she texted me at 2:15 p.m. from the trailhead. Said she was going about 4 miles in, to the area near the river bend where the Sitka spruce grove is." William knew the area. Everyone who worked Olympic knew that bend. The grove, where 10 trees, each over 200 feet tall, formed a cathedral of moss and silence. The locals called it the Crossroads, though no trails actually intersected there. They called it other things too, names in Quileute that William had heard once, 7 years ago, from a park volunteer who'd quit the next day. What time was she supposed to return? "Before dark. Hannah's careful, she knows the forest." Mrs. Shepard's hands shook as she unlocked her phone, showing him the message thread. The last text from Hannah. "Making great progress. Found the Cortinarius cluster I've been looking for. Back by 6, sent at 4:47 p.m. Nothing after. I called her at 7, 8, 9, midnight, 3 a.m., straight to voicemail every time." Mrs. Shepard looked at him with eyes that already knew the answer, but needed him to contradict her. "You have to find her." William pulled out his radio. "Dispatch, this is Ranger Hutchins at Hoh. I need to initiate a search protocol for a missing hiker. Female 23, last known position approximately mile marker 4 on the Hoh River Trail. Request immediate contact with William." The voice from dispatch cut him off. It was Sarah Chen, who'd worked Olympic longer than he had. Before you say anything else, is this in the Crossroads area? He watched Mrs. Shepherd, who couldn't hear the radio, her face desperate for action, for movement, for someone to do something. Affirmative. A pause. Then, I'll call in Johnson and Martinez from the Quinault station. They can be there in 40 minutes. Don't go alone. Understood. He clipped the radio back. Mrs. Shepherd, I need you to stay here at the visitor center. We're mobilizing a search team. Do you have a recent photo of Hannah I can take? She nodded, fumbling with her phone again, sending the picture to his number. The image appeared on his screen. Hannah in hiking gear, standing in front of massive ferns, her smile easy and genuine. William headed to his truck, a Forest Service F-250 with a Pelican case full of emergency equipment ratchet strapped in the bed. His SAR pack was already loaded: trauma kit, emergency bivvy, extra rope, water purification tablets, his personal locator beacon. He added handheld radios, extra batteries, and grabbed the Garmin GPS unit from the glove box. The thing about Olympic was that cell coverage died about a quarter mile into any trail. Even the GPS got unreliable under the canopy. The old growth was too thick, too layered. The forest didn't want to be mapped. He'd learned that 7 years ago when he was younger, cockier, certain that wilderness could be understood through topography and weather patterns. He'd learned it the night he spent following what he thought was a lost child crying in the woods near Lake Quinault, only to realize at dawn that he'd been walking in circles for 8 hours, the crying always the same distance away, until the sun rose and he found himself 200 yards from where he'd started, his equipment scattered in a pattern he couldn't remember making. He didn't talk about that night, but he'd transferred stations twice trying to forget it, and somehow ended up back at Olympic, back where the trees grew so dense the midday looked like dusk. The trail started innocent enough. Wooden boardwalk through a tunnel of vine maple and sword ferns. Educational plaques about the temperate rainforest ecosystem. Families with kids, retirees with walking poles, all of them oblivious that they were walking into one of the last true wildernesses in the continental United States, a place where people still vanished. William moved quickly, his stride eating up the flat first mile. The Hoh River ran to his right, glacier-fed and iron-gray, the sound of it a constant white noise that made other sounds hard to place. Moss hung from every branch in thick curtains, the kind of green that looked almost synthetic in its intensity. At mile 2, he started calling. Hannah! Hannah Shepherd! Search and rescue! The forest absorbed his voice like it absorbed everything else. Sound, light, certainty. Mile 3 brought him past the ranger boundary marker, a small wooden post that most hikers didn't notice. This was the line where maintained trail became wilderness trail, where the Park Service stopped pretending they could control what happened out here. The temperature had dropped. William checked his watch. 8:15 a.m., and it felt like October, not late September. His breath came out in small clouds. At mile 3.7, he found the first sign. A bandana, red with white paisley, tied around a low branch. Marking tape, the kind researchers used. Hannah's trail marker. Hannah! He moved faster now, following the sporadic markers. Another bandana at 3.9, a small flag at 4.1, then nothing. William stood at mile 4.2, in the shadow of the Sitka spruce grove. The trees here were ancient, their trunks so wide that 4 people couldn't link hands around them. The canopy blocked out the sky entirely, creating a perpetual twilight. Moss covered everything. The ground, the fallen logs, the rocks. It muffled sound, made distance impossible to judge. This was the crossroads. He saw the marker tree immediately. Everyone did. It was impossible not to see it. The spruce stood at the center of the grove, taller than the others, its base surrounded by a ring of stones that looked natural but weren't. Not quite. The bark was different here. Darker, marked with patterns that erosion didn't explain. Mushrooms grew in perfect circles around it. Cortinarius violaceus, purple webcaps, the same species Hannah had been studying. William's radio crackled. Hutchins, this is Johnson. We're 15 minutes out. What's your status? He pressed the talk button, but only static came back. He tried again. Nothing. The radio was dead, or the signal was blocked, or the forest had decided he didn't get to communicate anymore. If this story is capturing your attention, follow for more quality content. What would you do in William's situation? Share your thoughts. That's when he heard it. Not a voice, exactly. More like a voice-shaped space in the silence, a place where sound should be but wasn't. It came from deeper in the grove, past the marker tree where the land sloped down toward the river's edge. "Hannah?" His voice came out rougher than he intended. The non-sound shifted. Moved. William's training said to wait for backup. His training said to establish a perimeter, to call in the coordinates, to follow protocol. But he'd heard that sound before, 7 years ago when he'd followed the child who wasn't a child. He'd heard that same quality of wrongness, that audio illusion that made you want to follow it, to find its source, to make it make sense. His hand went to his belt, fingers brushing the canister of bear spray. Not that bear spray would help with whatever made that sound. He moved forward anyway. The grove opened into a small clearing that shouldn't exist, the trees too thick, the canopy too dense for anything like open space. But here it was, a rough circle maybe 20 feet across, carpeted in moss so vibrant it hurt to look at. In the center, a backpack, blue, covered in band patches and park stickers. A water bottle lay on its side, liquid, darkened by the moss. A field notebook, pages fluttering in wind William couldn't feel. Hannah's pack. Empty. William knelt, his knees sinking into moss that was wet and cold and deeper than it should be. The notebook was open to the last entry, dated yesterday 4:45 p.m. Found the grove. The specimens here are incredible, fruiting bodies in patterns I've never seen. The largest Cortinarius cluster is near the central tree. Locals say don't touch the center stones. Folklore about territorial spirits, probably related to burial practices. Either way, fascinating cultural intersection with... The entry ended mid-sentence. William stood scanning the clearing. No signs of struggle. No torn fabric, no blood, no indication of animal activity. Hannah's pack was neatly placed like she'd set it down intentionally. The stones around the marker tree were closer now. He didn't remember walking toward them, but he was standing 3 feet away, close enough to see that the rocks weren't river stones at all. They were carved, very slightly, with marks that might have been letters in a language that predated letters. The non-sound came again, from behind him this time. William spun. Nothing. Just trees and moss and the filtered light that seemed dimmer now, though his watch said 8:47 a.m. "Hannah Shepherd." His voice cracked on the last syllable. "If you can hear me, make a sound. Any sound." The forest answered with something that wasn't quite an echo. His words came back changed, rearranged, like they'd been taken apart and reassembled by something that didn't quite understand language but knew how to mimic it. His heart rate spiked. He recognized this feeling, the spike of adrenaline that came with understanding on a level deeper than thought, that he was in immediate danger. The kind of knowing that bypassed logic and went straight to the brainstem, to the part of the human animal that remembered being prey. Behind him, a branch snapped. William turned slowly, his hand on the bear spray. Hannah stood at the edge of the clearing. She looked perfect. Exactly like her photo. Same ponytail, same hiking gear, same smile. She raised a hand in a small wave, her expression confused, almost apologetic. "Hey," she said, her voice clear and normal. "Are you looking for me?" Every instinct William had learned in 7 years of backcountry work screamed at him not to answer. Because Hannah stood in shadow that didn't match the light, and when she moved, the movement was slightly delayed, like watching a video with the audio sync off. "Hannah?" He kept his distance. "Your mother's worried. We need to get you back to the visitor center." She tilted her head, the gesture too smooth, too fluid. "I don't want to leave yet. I found something incredible here. Come see." She gestured toward the marker tree. William's mouth was dry. "Hannah, how long have you been out here?" "Not long." Her smile didn't change. "Come on. It's just over here. You'll want to see this." She started walking toward the stones, her steps leaving no impressions in the moss. "Stop." William's voice came out harder than he intended. Don't move. Hannah stopped, turned. Her smile was still there, but something in her eyes was different now. Older. You can see it, can't you? That I'm not quite right. The temperature dropped another 10 degrees in seconds. William's breath came out in thick clouds. 7 years ago, the thing wearing Hannah's face said, its voice layering with harmonics that didn't belong to human vocal cords. You walked my paths. You followed the sounds I made. You touched the stones you weren't supposed to touch. William's legs went numb. The night at Lake Kinno. The child that wasn't a child. He'd been so turned around by dawn that he didn't remember, but he must have touched something. Must have crossed some boundary he didn't know existed. I let you leave, the voice continued, because you were ignorant. Stupid with youth and certainty. But you came back. You brought your roads and your rangers and your tourists. You brought them past the markers into the places that were sealed. Where's Hannah? William forced the words out. The real Hannah. The figure's smile widened impossibly. Everywhere and nowhere, in the moss, in the river, in the stones. She touched what she shouldn't have touched, and now she's part of what guards this place. Bring her back. Why? The thing stepped closer. She's happier now. Infinite. Part of something older than your species, than your words for old. You could join her. You were always supposed to come back to me. William's hand found the radio at his belt. Still dead. His phone. No signal. The GPS unit showed his location as a blank space, coordinates that didn't resolve to any map. I don't believe you, he said, surprised by the steadiness in his voice. If Hannah was gone, truly gone, you wouldn't need to wear her face. You're trying to lure me closer because I'm the only one out here who knows what you are. The thing stopped smiling. You can't have her, William said. And you can't have me. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then Hannah's face began to change. Not dramatically. Not with horror movie morphing, but in small ways that made it worse. The proportions shifted slightly. The eyes moved fractionally farther apart. The mouth opened just a millimeter too wide. The stones marked the boundary, it said, and now the voice was layered with dozens of others, centuries of others. Past them, I am absolute. On this side, I can only invite, only suggest. You rangers, you mark your trails, your boundaries. You think your markers matter, but ours were here first. William looked at the clearing again, seeing it differently now. The stone circle wasn't around the marker tree. The marker tree was in the center, but the stones, they formed a perimeter around the entire clearing. He was inside it. He'd walked past the markers when he entered. This grove has been mine for 8,000 years, the voice said. Your Hannah knew the stories. She came anyway. She was warned. They're all warned. Show me. William's hands were shaking, but he kept his voice level. Show me Hannah, alive and whole, or I'm walking out of here right now and bringing every ranger, every SAR team, every goddamn news crew in Washington state to tear this grove apart until we find her. The thing laughed, and it was the worst sound William had ever heard, like wind through empty buildings, like ice breaking on a lake, like the absence of everything human. Then it vanished. Not disappeared, vanished, like it had never been there at all. William stood alone in the clearing, his heart hammering, his vision narrowed to a tunnel. He counted to 10, forcing his breathing to slow. 7 years of wilderness training. He knew panic. He knew how to recognize it and push through it. The backpack was still there. The notebook. The water bottle. He picked up the notebook, flipping through the pages carefully. Hannah's handwriting was meticulous, scientific. Pages of observations, sketches of fungal structures, notes about soil composition and canopy cover. The last entry remained unfinished, but on the final page, written in letters so faint they might have been imagined, in handwriting that shook like it had been written in extreme cold. Don't trust what looks like me. William's radio crackled to life. Chians, respond. William, do you copy? This is Johnson. We're at mile marker 4. Where are you? He pressed the talk button. I'm here, the Crossroads Grove. I found evidence, but Stay where you are, we're coming to you, do not move. William looked around the clearing one more time, at the stones, at the marker tree, at the place where not Hannah had stood. He saw the footprints now, his own entering the clearing, clear impressions in the deep moss. And beside them, running parallel, another set of prints leading away from where the thing had vanished. They headed deeper into the forest, past the stone markers, into territory that wasn't on any map. Hannah's footprints, fresh. Every protocol, every training session, every safety briefing said not to follow, to wait for backup, to secure the scene. But William had been here 7 years ago, and he'd left someone behind in the dark. He'd heard the crying and turned away at dawn, told himself it wasn't real, that he'd been confused, that isolation did strange things to perception. He'd gone home. The crying had stopped. He'd never learned what happened to the sound he'd followed, the thing that might have been a child, the thing that might have needed help. He wasn't leaving anyone behind this time. William unclipped his bear spray, checked his headlamp even though it was daytime, and followed Hannah's footprints past the stone markers, into the part of the forest that belonged to something else. The temperature dropped immediately. The light changed quality, became thicker somehow, more tangible. The moss was deeper here, up to his shins in places, and it grabbed at his boots with each step. The footprints continued, steady, heading downslope toward where the river's roar grew louder. William followed, marking his path with torn pieces of his incident report. Paper trail, literally. Every 20 yards he stopped, listened, looked back. The forest behind him looked different each time. The trees rearranged themselves in his peripheral vision, never moving when he looked directly at them, but somehow never quite in the same configuration as before. The footprints led to the river's edge. The Ho ran fast and cold here, over rocks that had been carried down from the glaciers of Mount Olympus 40 miles away. The water was opaque, carrying glacial flour that made it the color of wet concrete. Hannah's footprints ended at the bank. No disturbance in the water, no sign of entry. They just stopped, like she'd stepped off the edge of the world. William knelt, examining the last print. The detail was perfect. He could see the tread pattern of her hiking boot, the slight twist of her ankle as she'd turned. Turned to look at what? He raised his head. On the opposite bank, maybe 30 feet away across water too fast and cold to survive crossing, Hannah sat on a fallen log. The real Hannah. He knew it instantly, the way you know real from fake even when the fake is perfect. She sat with her arms wrapped around herself, shivering violently, her lips blue, her hair plastered to her head. She looked exhausted, terrified, and very, very alive. "Hannah!" William's voice barely carried over the river's noise. She looked up. Their eyes met. "Don't come across," she screamed, her voice hoarse. "It's not water, it's..." Something moved behind her, not the thing wearing her face. Something else. Something that had never been human, that had never tried to look human. It stood in the shadow of a cedar, and William's mind couldn't quite process what he was seeing. The shape was wrong, the proportions impossible, like looking at a photograph where the perspective had been corrupted. "Hannah!" He scanned the riverbank, looking for a way across. Downstream, maybe 50 yards, a massive log spanned the water. "The log. Can you get to the log?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I can't move. Every time I try, it gets closer. It's been standing there all night just watching me, waiting for me to try to cross." William's mind raced through options. The radio still crackled with static and fragments of Johnson's voice, too broken to understand. He could go back, get the team, bring ropes and proper river crossing equipment. But he knew, with the certainty that had kept him alive through 12 seasons in the wilderness, that if he left Hannah here, she wouldn't be here when he came back. The thing in the shadows would wait exactly as long as it took for William to disappear, and then it would finish whatever it had started. "Listen to me," William called across the water. "I'm going to cross on the log. When I do, you run. You run upstream, follow the bank. Don't stop no matter what you hear or see. There's a game trail about a 1/4 mile up. It'll take you back to the main path. Follow my paper trail. Run until you find the other rangers. What about you? William unhooked his SR pack, setting it on the ground. He took out the flare gun, bright orange, designed for emergencies. He had 2 flares. I'll be right behind you, he lied. He moved downstream to the log. It was a cedar, dead for decades but still solid, stripped of bark and worn smooth. It spanned the river at a slight angle, maybe 40 feet across. The water below churned white over boulders that would break bones. William stepped onto the log. His balance was good. You didn't work backcountry without it. The log was wide enough, maybe 3 feet in diameter. He moved carefully, steadily, not looking at the water, focusing on the next step, then the next. Halfway across, the log moved. Not much. Just a shudder, like something had bumped it from below. William froze, arms spread for balance. Another shudder. The log rotated slightly, moss slicking under his boots. He looked down. Something was in the water. Multiple somethings, pale shapes that moved wrong, arms or tentacles or something else entirely, reaching up toward the log's underside. Where they touched, the wood turned black, rotting in seconds. William! Hannah's scream came from the far bank. He ran. 3 steps, 4. The log buckling beneath him, the wood cracking with sounds like gunshots. He jumped the last 5 feet, hit the far bank in a roll, came up with his bear spray in one hand and the flare gun in the other. Hannah was running. Good. The thing in the shadows was moving too, sliding between trees with motion that hurt to watch. William fired the flare at the base of the cedar where the thing had been. The flare exploded in phosphorus fury, magnesium bright, burning at 1,600 degrees Fahrenheit. The thing screamed, not with sound but with light inverting, with shadows becoming solid and writhing. He ran after Hannah, firing the second flare behind him without looking. The forest opened into chaos. The trees moved now, openly, roots pulling up from the ground and replanting themselves in his path. The moss reached, the air thickened. William caught up to Hannah at the game trail, grabbed her hand. "Don't let go," he gasped. They ran together, crashing through undergrowth, branches tearing at their clothes. Behind them, the forest folded in on itself, reality compressing. William could feel it, like pressure in his ears, the weight of something immense turning its attention toward them. The paper trail, there, a piece of white against the moss. Then another. He followed them, Hannah beside him, both of them stumbling, breathing in ragged gasps. The stone markers appeared ahead. "Almost there!" William pulled Hannah forward. "The boundary!" They crossed the stones. The pressure released instantly like surfacing from deep water. William and Hannah collapsed on the far side, in the clearing where her backpack still lay, where the morning light looked almost normal. Behind them, past the markers, the forest settled back into stillness. The thing they'd run from was there. William could feel it, but it stopped at the boundary, watching, waiting. "Hutchins! Shepard!" Johnson and Martinez came crashing through the brush, followed by 2 more rangers William didn't recognize. They had ropes, radios that actually worked, an emergency stretcher. Found them. Martinez was already radioing dispatch. Both subjects located and apparently unharmed, requesting medical evac to... "She needs warming," William interrupted, wrapping his jacket around Hannah's shoulders. "She's hypothermic. I need emergency blankets, hot packs, and we need to move now." The evacuation was professional, efficient. Hannah was wrapped in reflective blankets, given hot chocolate from someone's thermos, walked carefully back to the trailhead. Mrs. Shepard was crying, hugging her daughter, thanking William over and over. EMTs arrived. Hannah was loaded into an ambulance. She'd be okay, they said. Mild hypothermia, dehydration, shock, nothing permanent. William filed his report at the station, leaving out most of what happened. He wrote, "Subject located on opposite bank of Ho River, disoriented and hypothermic. Successful extraction via game trail upstream. No injuries." Sarah Chen read the report, looking at him with eyes that had seen 12 years of Olympics strangeness. That all of it? That's the part that goes in the file. She nodded. Johnson said the forest looked wrong in there, said the GPS went crazy near the crossroads, said you crossed the river on a log that wasn't there on the way back. He should get his equipment checked. Yeah. She filed the report. William, whatever you did out there, thank you. He drove home to his apartment in Forks, showered, tried to sleep. The dreams came anyway, but different this time. He dreamed of Hannah, safe with her mother. He dreamed of the stones holding their ground. He dreamed of the thing in the shadows, and in the dream, it nodded at him once. Acknowledgement, not respect, but recognition. Some debts were paid, some boundaries held. William woke at dawn, made coffee, and dressed for his shift. When he checked his phone, there was a text from an unknown number. Thank you. Really? I'm okay. Mom's okay. We're heading home today. One thing, though. I was reading my field notes from that day. The last page. I didn't write those words. Don't trust what looks like me. That wasn't my handwriting. Did you see something that looked like me? William stared at the message for a long time. Then he typed, "Glad you're safe. Forrest can play tricks sometimes. Take care of yourself." He deleted it before sending. Instead, he wrote, "Yes. It tried to get me to follow it deeper into the grove. I didn't. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Thank you for not following it. Thank you for following me instead." William set his phone down and finished his coffee. Outside, the rain had started, the way it always did in Olympic. Soft, persistent, endless. The kind of rain that fed the moss that made the forest grow 200 feet tall, that kept the old places old and wild. He'd go back to work. He'd walk the trails, help the lost, warn the reckless. He'd maintain the boundaries, the ones on maps and the ones that weren't. Because 7 years ago, he'd walked away from something that needed him. And today, he hadn't. That had to be worth something, even in a forest that remembered everything and forgave nothing. William picked up his SAR pack, checked his radio, and headed for his truck. There were trails to patrol, hikers to advise, boundaries to maintain. Some of them were even marked on the maps. Thank you for reading to the end. If you appreciated this narrative, consider following for more engaging stories. What's your interpretation about the fate of the Guardian and William's past? I'd love to read your theories in the comments. The radio crackled at 6:47 a.m., pulling David Martinez from his third cup of coffee. Outside the ranger station window, fog blanketed the Hoh River Valley like wet wool, muffling the Douglas firs into gray suggestions of themselves. Range 3, this is dispatch. We have a code yellow at Holt Creek Trail. Female 23. Failed to return from solo hike yesterday. Families en route from Seattle. David set down his mug, the ceramic still warm against his palm. Code yellow. Missing person. He'd worked Olympic National Park for 11 years. Long enough to know that most missing hikers turned up sheepish and dehydrated within 12 hours. Long enough to know when something felt wrong. Copy that, dispatch. Last known position? Trailhead log shows she signed in at 10:15 a.m. yesterday. Planned route, Holt Creek to Whispering Grove, return by 16 GAO. Vehicle still at Trailhead, 2015 Honda Civic, Washington plates. David pulled up the topographic map on his tablet, tracing the route with his finger. 8 miles one way, elevation gain of 2,300 feet. Moderate difficulty. But Holt Creek Trail had a reputation. The local Quileute referred to that section of forest as Kawelhaltun, the place where people turned around. Not because of terrain difficulty, because of feeling. What's the hiker's name? Sophia Chen, 5'4", black hair, last seen wearing a red North Face jacket. Red. Good. Visibility in dense forest. David scribbled notes on his weatherproof pad, muscle memory from hundreds of search operations. But something nagged at him. Holt Creek. The trail that meandered past that ancient cedar grove where, last summer, 3 separate hiking parties had reported the same unsettling experience, the sudden conviction that they were trespassing. I'll head out within 20. Request we activate SAR protocol and get K9 unit on standby. Copy. Family will meet you at Trailhead. Martinez. The dispatcher paused. Linda, who'd worked there since before digital maps. Be careful out there. An odd thing to say about a routine search. David almost asked why, but his personal phone buzzed. A text from his wife, Anna. Morning. Emma wants to know if you're still coaching her soccer game Saturday. She made captain. Call when you can. Love you. He typed back quickly. Tell our captain I'll be there. Proud of her. Love you both. Saturday was 3 days away. Plenty of time to find one lost hiker and make it home. He'd promised Emma he'd never miss a game. In 11 years, he'd kept that promise. David gathered his gear with practiced efficiency. Garmin GPS, first aid kit, emergency blanket, rope, knife, headlamp, water purification tablets, protein bars, rain shell. He checked his Motorola radio, fully charged. Cell service would die 2 miles in, but radio range extended to 12 miles on clear days. On foggy days like this, maybe 6. The drive to Holt Creek Trailhead took 40 minutes on the park road, winding through old-growth forest where trees blocked out the sky. David's truck knew every pothole by heart. At mile marker 23, he passed the pullout where he'd proposed to Anna 16 years ago, both of them fresh out of college, convinced they could live on love and seasonal ranger wages. Somehow, they'd made it work. The trailhead parking lot held exactly 2 vehicles, Sophia Chen's Honda and a silver Lexus with Seattle dealer plates, the family. David parked and approached the Lexus just as a man in his 50s emerged, face drawn, expensive fleece jacket incongruous against the wild backdrop. Are you the ranger? Robert Chen. I'm Sophia's father. His handshake was desperate, too firm. My daughter's been out here alone for 20 hours. 20 hours. Why aren't there helicopters? Why aren't there search dogs? David had learned long ago that panicked families needed facts, not platitudes. Mr. Chen, I'm Ranger David Martinez. I've conducted 43 successful search operations in this park. The fog ceiling is too low for helicopters right now, but I have K9 on standby. I'm heading out immediately to track your daughter's route. Immediately? You're going alone? Standard protocol for initial assessment. I'll locate her trail, establish probable search zones, then bring in additional resources if needed. David pulled out his notepad. Tell me about Sophia. Is she an experienced hiker? Robert's wife, David assumed, stepped out of the car, eyes reddened. She's been hiking since high school. She's careful. She always texts when she gets back to her car. Her voice cracked. Always. Did she mention why she chose this particular trail? The parents exchanged a glance. Robert cleared his throat. She's doing graduate research at UW Environmental Science. She wanted to document old-growth cedar groves for her thesis. She specifically mentioned Whispering Grove. David wrote this down, though his chest had already tightened. Whispering Grove sat at the trail's terminus 8 miles in, where Holt Creek split around a moss-covered island. At the island's center stood the grandfather cedar, estimated age, born 200 years, and surrounding it, dozens of smaller ancient cedars arranged in an almost perfect circle. The Quileute said those trees had been planted there by the forest itself, to mark sacred ground. Did Sophia know the local history of that area? History? Robert frowned. What history? Before David could answer, his radio crackled. Range 3, dispatch, weather update, fog persisting through 14 Wang, possible rain by evening, temperature dropping to 43 degrees tonight. 43 degrees. Sophia had been out for 20 hours. If she was injured, immobile, hypothermia became a significant risk. Copy, dispatch. David turned back to the Chens. I need an item of Sophia's clothing, something she's worn recently, for the dogs. Mrs. Chen retrieved a sweatshirt from the Honda, UW Huskies logo. faint perfume scent. David sealed it in an evidence bag. "Wait." Robert grabbed David's arm. "What history? What aren't you telling us?" David met his eyes. 11 years had taught him that false hope killed slower than truth. This section of forest is culturally significant to the local tribes. Some hikers report feeling uncomfortable in certain areas. It's probably nothing. Psychological response to isolation, that's all. But it sometimes causes people to leave the established trail. "You're saying my daughter got spooked and wandered off?" Robert's face reddened. "I'm saying I'm going to find her." David's voice stayed level. "I have your contact numbers. I'll radio updates every 2 hours. There's coffee in the ranger station 5 miles back. Wait there." He didn't wait for a response. Every minute mattered now. The forest swallowed David whole 300 feet from the trailhead. This was temperate rainforest, not the sunny pine-scented forests of postcards, but something ancient and indifferent. Sitka spruce towered 200 feet overhead, their branches supporting entire ecosystems of moss and fern. The understory grew dense with salal and huckleberry, and everything, bark, stone, air, dripped with moisture. David moved at a steady pace, eyes scanning for signs. The trail was well maintained here, packed earth and the occasional wooden step. Sophia's footprints appeared clearly in the mud. Size 7 Nike hiking boots, distinctive waffle tread. She'd been walking steadily, not running. No signs of stumbling. At the 1-mile marker, David paused to mark the location on his GPS and snap photos of the clearest prints. His radio hissed static. "Range 3 checking in. 1 mile in, clear trail sign, no indicators of distress. Continuing." "Copy, Range 3. The trail climbed gradually alongside Holt Creek, which chattered over stones worn smooth by millennia. Normally, David found this sound soothing. Anna called it his forest meditation. Today, it felt too loud, masking other sounds he needed to hear. At mile 2, the creek forked around a massive fallen hemlock, and Sophia's tracks diverged briefly from the main trail. David's pulse quickened until he saw why. She'd stopped to photograph a cluster of chicken-of-the-woods fungus growing from the dead wood. He could see where she'd crouched, where her boot toe had dug in for balance. Then she'd returned to the trail, observant, methodical. Good signs. If this story is capturing your attention, follow for more quality content. What would you do in David's situation? Continue alone or wait for backup? Share your thoughts. The terrain steepened at mile 3, where the trail switchbacked up a ridge. David's thighs burned pleasantly. He stayed in shape for exactly this. At the ridgetop, the trail leveled out, and visibility expanded. Through gaps in the canopy, he could see the valley below, fog settling in the low points like milk in a bowl. He paused to drink water and check his notes. According to the trailhead log, Sophia had estimated 4 hours to reach Whispering Grove. Reasonable for her pace. That would put her there around 2:15 p.m. She'd planned to spend an hour documenting the grove, then return, but she'd never made it back. The question was, had she reached the grove at all? David keyed his radio. Range 3, mile 3, still tracking. Footprints consistent and clear. Subject was maintaining good pace, no apparent difficulties. Continuing to Whispering Grove. Copy. Be advised, K9 unit available now. Do you want them deployed? David considered. If Sophia had simply gotten injured at the grove, he'd reach her within 2 hours. But if she'd left the trail somewhere ahead, dogs would cut search time significantly. Affirmative. Send them in. Have them start from trailhead with Sophia's scent article. Copy that. David pressed on. The forest grew quieter as he climbed, fewer birds, less wind, just the sound of his breathing and boots on packed earth. At mile 4, he noticed something odd. Several trees bore fresh scratches at shoulder height, bark peeled away in long strips. Elk, probably. They rubbed velvet from their antlers in fall, but the marks looked frantic, chaotic, and there were too many, all clustered in this one section. He photographed them anyway, then moved on. At mile 5, Sophia's footprints stopped, David's stomach dropped. He backtracked 20 feet, scanning carefully. There, the tracks continued, but they'd left the main trail. She'd stepped onto a narrow game trail, barely visible, that branched off toward the northwest. This was wrong. Whispering Grove lay straight ahead, another 3 miles. Why would she detour? David crouched to examine the prints. No signs of stumbling or running. She'd walked deliberately onto this side trail. He looked up, trying to see what might have caught her attention. Nothing obvious, just forest, thick and trackless. He keyed his radio. Range 3, mile 5. Subject left main trail onto unmarked path bearing 315 degrees. Tracks appear deliberate. Following. Copy. Do you want additional personnel? Negative. Trail is fresh and clear. We'll update in 30 minutes. David switched on his GPS tracker to breadcrumb his route, then followed Sophia's prints into the underbrush. The game trail wound between ancient stumps. This area had been logged in the 1940s before the park's designation. Second growth trees now reached 60 feet, but they couldn't match the giants that had stood here before. The understory grew denser without old-growth canopy to shade it out. Sophia's tracks remained visible in the soft earth, and David noticed something. She'd been moving faster here. Longer stride, deeper toe impressions. Not running exactly, but walking with purpose. Toward something? Away from something? After 10 minutes, the game trail ended at a small clearing. David stopped, skin prickling. The clearing was roughly circular, maybe 40 feet across. Every tree at its perimeter bore the same strange marks he'd seen earlier. Bark stripped away, wood gouged deeply. In the clearing center, someone had arranged stones in a spiral pattern, each stone roughly the size of a human head. Fresh stones. They hadn't been there long enough to gather moss. Sophia's footprints circled the spiral once, twice. Then they led to the clearing's far side and stopped. David's heart hammered. He approached carefully, eyes on the ground. The track simply ended at the base of a massive Sitka spruce, as if she'd walked directly into the tree. No, he whispered. This wasn't possible. He circled the spruce, searching for any continuation. Nothing. He widened his search to 50 feet, then 75, walking a careful grid pattern. No prints. No broken branches, no signs of passage. David forced himself to breathe slowly, to think like a professional. There had to be an explanation. Perhaps Sophia had backtracked, stepping carefully in her own footprints. He'd seen that before. Experienced hikers sometimes covered their tracks to what? Why would she do that? He examined the tree itself. Ancient bark, deeply furrowed, covered in staghorn lichen. At eye level, he noticed something wedged into the bark, a small notebook, the kind field researchers carried. David pulled it free with trembling fingers. The cover read, "Property of Sophia Chen," in neat handwriting. He opened it. The last entry was dated yesterday, 3:47 p.m. Found the grove. It's more magnificent than the literature suggested. The grandfather cedar is absolutely massive. I estimate 18-foot diameter, but something's wrong with the GPS. It keeps showing my location is shifting even though I'm standing still. Phone has no signal. We'll try to document quickly and head back before dark. 4:23 p.m. The arrangement of the surrounding cedars isn't random. They form a perfect circle, 127 feet in diameter, measured with rangefinder. Spacing is too regular to be natural. The Quileute legends describe this as a boundary marker. Boundary of what? 4:51 p.m. Temperature has dropped at least 10 degrees in the past hour. No wind, no birds, no insects, just silence. I keep feeling like someone's watching me, but every time I turn around, nothing. Just trees. Need to leave soon. 5:19 p.m. Found a trail leading away from the grove, not on any map. Very old, very straight, runs northwest toward the creek fork. Going to follow it briefly to see where. The entry ended mid-sentence. The remaining pages were blank. David's hands shook as he bagged the notebook. This changed everything. Sophia had made it to Whispering Grove, spent nearly 2 hours there, then found some unmarked trail and followed it. That trail had led her here? To this clearing? But where had she gone from here? He keyed his radio. Range 3 to dispatch. Located subject's field notebook. Last entry indicates she found an unmapped trail leading away from Whispering Grove. I'm approximately... He checked his GPS. 0.8 miles northwest of the grove at an unmarked clearing. Subject's tracks end here, requesting immediate deployment of full SAR team and K9. Static. Then, Range 3, we're having trouble reading you. Signal degradation. Please repeat. David adjusted his radio, boosting power. Dispatch, this is Range 3. Do you copy? More static, then fragments. OP. Breaking. Your location. My coordinates are... David rattled off the GPS numbers, but his radio crackled and died. He checked the battery. Full charge. He tried again. Nothing but white noise. He was alone. David stood in the clearing, professional training warring with a deep, primal unease. The forest around him had gone completely silent. No birds, no squirrels, no wind. Just his breathing and the distant whisper of the creek. No, not just the creek. Something else. A sound almost below hearing, like voices murmuring in a language he'd never learned. He turned slowly, scanning the tree line. Nothing moved, but every instinct honed by years in wilderness screamed at him, leave, now. David thought of Emma's text, Saturday's soccer game, Anna's smile, his promise to always come home. Then he thought of Robert and Mrs. Chen, waiting at the ranger station, clutching coffee cups with white knuckles. He thought of Sophia, alone out here for 20 hours. He checked his supplies. 4 hours of daylight remaining, full water, emergency gear. GPS still worked, breadcrumbing his route. He'd mark this location, continue following the evidence, and a branch snapped behind him. David spun, hand dropping to the bear spray on his belt. Nothing, just trees. Another snap, closer, then another, from a different direction. Something was moving through the forest. Multiple somethings. Circling. David's throat went dry. He'd worked in bear country for 11 years. He knew how apex predators moved, how they sounded. This wasn't that. This was deliberate, intelligent. Wrong. He backed toward the spiral of stones in the clearing's center, giving himself 360 visibility. His radio hung useless at his belt. No backup, no communication. The circling stopped. For 10 heartbeats, nothing. Just silence. Then, from the forest to his left, a voice. David. His name. Spoken in Anna's voice. David, where are you? Emma's asking for you. Impossible. Anna was home in Port Angeles, 90 miles away. And yet... David, I'm scared. Please come home. Different direction now. Still Anna's voice, but wrong somehow. The inflection off. Like someone imitating her without understanding the words. She's not here. David's voice came out steady, surprising him. Whoever you are, whatever you are, she's not here. The voice stopped. Then from directly behind him, help me. Sophia's voice. He knew it was Sophia, though he'd never heard her speak. Young, frightened, desperate. Please, David, I'm hurt. I can't find my way back. Please help me. David's hands clenched into fists. Show yourself. I'm here. In the trees, I can't move, please. Then tell me which tree. I'll come to you. Silence. Then, slowly. The big one, the spruce. I'm behind it. David didn't move. Sophia left her notebook at that tree. If you're Sophia, tell me what you wrote in your last entry. The silence stretched longer this time. When the voice came again, it had changed. Deeper. Older. Not Anna. Not Sophia. You should not have followed her here. The temperature dropped. David could see his breath now, fog blooming from his lips. Ice crystals formed on the nearest branches, spreading with unnatural speed. This place is protected. The boundary was marked. She crossed it. So have you. David's training screamed at him to run, but he forced himself to stay still, to think. The Quileute legends described boundaries, sacred places, guardians. "I'm a ranger," he said, voice carrying across the clearing. "I protect this forest. I'm not here to desecrate anything. I'm here to find someone who got lost." She was not lost. She came seeking knowledge that was not meant for her, counting trees, measuring sacred ground, taking photographs. The voice seemed to come from everywhere now. Making records. "She's a scientist." She meant no disrespect. The old ones knew. They did not count. They did not measure. They walked the boundary and turned back. A pause. "You felt it, didn't you? At mile 3, the urge to return. You should have listened." David remembered the moment, a flutter of unease, a whisper in his mind suggesting he should wait for backup. He'd dismissed it as nerves. "Where is she?" "Beyond?" "Beyond what?" "The boundary you are standing on." David looked down. The spiral of stones beneath his feet seemed to glow faintly in the dimming light. He stepped back, off the stones. The temperature rose immediately. 5 degrees. 10. "If I leave," David said carefully, "will you let her go?" Laughter rippled through the trees, not cruel, but ancient and unknowable. "I do not hold her. She holds herself. Fear locks the door from inside." "I don't understand." "You will." The forest rushed back to life all at once. Bird song, wind, the rustle of small animals. David's radio crackled. "Range 3, do you copy? We've been trying to reach you for 10 minutes. What's your status?" David grabbed his radio. "Dispatch, I copy. He stopped, unsure what to say. "I'm at the clearing. I found Sophia's notebook, but..." How could he explain? "Range 3, K9 unit is half a mile behind you, following your tracker. ETA 15 minutes. Do you want them to..." A sound cut through the forest. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. Someone calling for help. "Hold that," David said. He turned, trying to pinpoint the direction. There, northwest, deeper into the forest. "Help, somebody, please." Female voice. Young. Sophia. David keyed his radio. "I hear her. Subject is calling for help, bearing approximately 320 degrees from my position, moving to intercept." He ran. The forest floor blurred beneath David's boots as he crashed through underbrush, following Sophia's cries. Professional caution warred with desperate urgency. He knew better than to run in dense forest, knew the dangers of twisted ankles and hidden drops. But that voice, raw with fear and exhaustion, pulled him forward. "Sophia, keep calling, I'm coming. Here, I'm here, please hurry." The voice grew closer. David vaulted a fallen log, ducked beneath a low-hanging branch, and burst into a narrow ravine he hadn't seen on any map. And there she was. Sophia Chen sat at the ravine's bottom, maybe 12 feet below the ledge where David stood. Her red North Face jacket stood out against the dark earth. She looked up at him, face streaked with tears and dirt, eyes wide with relief. Thank God. I thought I've been calling for hours and nobody..." She dissolved into sobs. David's heart hammered. "Sophia, I'm Ranger David Martinez. Your parents sent me. Are you injured?" "My ankle. I think it's broken. I fell down here last night trying to find the trail. I can't climb out." David assessed quickly. The ravine was steep but not vertical. He could rappel down with rope, stabilize her ankle, and... He stopped. Something was wrong. Sophia wore her red jacket, but it looked brand new. No dirt, no tears. She'd supposedly spent 20 hours in the forest, falling, crawling, struggling. Where were the scratches, the mud, the exhaustion lines around her eyes, and her position? She sat almost casually, back against the ravine wall, one leg extended. If her ankle was broken, she should be in agony. Should be pale, shocky. Instead, her color looked normal. "Sophia, David said slowly. What time did you fall? Last night. Maybe 8 o'clock. It was getting dark. And you've been here since then? Yes, I tried to climb out, but my ankle... She gestured helplessly. Show me your ankle. She hesitated, just a fraction of a second. Then she reached for her boot. Wait. David's hand moved to his bear spray. First tell me, what did you write in your field notebook? Last entry. Sophia's hand stilled. She looked up at him. What? Your field notebook. I found it at the clearing. What did you write? I don't remember. It was yesterday. I was documenting the grove and... You wrote that temperature had dropped 10 degrees. You wrote that you heard no birds, no insects. You found a trail leading northwest. David's voice stayed level. You wrote that you were going to follow it. Sophia stared at him. Her expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes did. A calculation. A reassessment. Yes, she said finally. That's right. I remember now. So you followed the trail. Where did it lead? Here. I got lost and fell. David shook his head. No. Your tracks led to a clearing with a stone spiral. They ended at a spruce tree. You never made it to this ravine. The thing wearing Sophia's face smiled. It wasn't a human expression. The muscles moved correctly, but the intent behind them was alien, curious, almost playful. You're clever, it said, and the voice had changed. Still Sophia's, but layered now, harmonics that shouldn't exist in a human throat. Most don't notice until they're down here. David's skin crawled. Where is she? Where's the real Sophia? Safe. Beyond. Where you would be if you'd followed. The Sophia thing tilted its head. Instead, you stopped. You questioned. You resisted. The boundary. Yes. You're the guardian. One of them. We are many and one, like the forest itself. It stood, and David noticed its ankle bore no injury. Your kind used to understand this. The old ones knew the boundaries and honored them. But now you come with cameras and measurements, counting what should not be counted, naming what should remain nameless. David's mind raced. Every wilderness survival course, every search and rescue scenario, none had prepared him for this. But his radio still worked. His GPS still functioned. Whatever this entity was, it existed within physical reality. Or at least, it intersected with physical reality, which meant Sophia was still findable. You said she's beyond, David pressed. Beyond the boundary. Can I bring her back? The entity considered him. You could try, but why would you? She crossed knowing. She read the legends, saw the warnings, and chose to violate sacred ground. Why should she be saved? Because she's human. Because she made a mistake. Because her parents are waiting for her. David's voice hardened. Because it's my job. Your job. The entity laughed, a sound like wind through cedar boughs. You serve the forest. You protect it, yet you would let one more human intrude, measure, take, destroy. I serve the people who visit the forest. And yes, I protect the forest from those who would harm it. But Sophia wasn't trying to harm anything. She was trying to understand. Understanding is the first step to domination. Or the first step to respect. The entity paused. For a long moment, it simply watched him with Sophia's eyes. Then it said, You interest me, David Martinez. You have the old blood. I can smell it. Somewhere in your line, someone knew how to walk softly, how to listen. It gestured at the ravine. If you want her back, you must cross to bring her. But know this, the boundary protects both ways. Once you cross, you cannot return unless she chooses to release you. She? Sophia? No, the forest. Behind David, branches crackled. He turned to see K-9 Officer Jenny Park emerge from the tree line with her German Shepherd Atlas. Her face brightened with relief. David, we got your signal and... She stopped, seeing Sophia in the ravine. Holy shit, is that her? Is she okay? David turned back. The ravine was empty. What the... Jenny moved to the edge, peering down. Where'd she go? I saw her right there. Atlas whined, pressing against Jenny's leg. The dog's hackles rose, and he refused to approach the ravine edge. Jenny. David grabbed her arm. What exactly did you see? I saw you talking to someone in that ravine. A woman in a red jacket. I called out and you turned, and when I looked back... She stared at the empty space. David, what the hell is going on? David's radio crackled. Range 3, dispatch. We have GPS anomalies in your area. Your tracker is showing multiple positions simultaneously. Are you experiencing equipment malfunction? He keyed the mic. Dispatch negative. Equipment functioning normally. He glanced at Jenny. But I'm not alone anymore. Officer Park has joined me. Copy. Be advised. K9 unit reports Atlas is refusing to track. Handler request guidance. Jenny looked at her dog, then at David. Atlas was a 6-year veteran, trained in wilderness rescue. David had seen him track through blizzards and across rock faces. He'd never seen the dog refuse work. The dog knows, David said quietly. He can sense it. Sense what? David pulled out Sophia's notebook and handed it to Jenny. Read the last entry. While Jenny read, David studied the ravine. If the entity was telling the truth, if Sophia was beyond and could only be reached by crossing, then he needed to find the actual crossing point, the place where reality grew thin, the stone spiral. It had to be. This is insane, Jenny whispered, lowering the notebook. David, she wrote about temperature drops and GPS glitches and feeling watched. That matches what... She swallowed. That matches the reports from last summer. The 3 hiking parties that turned back. I know. So what are we saying here? That there's something actually supernatural in this forest? I'm saying Sophia Chen has been missing for 22 hours, and every piece of evidence suggests she found something she wasn't supposed to find. David met Jenny's eyes. I'm saying I saw her, or something wearing her face, in that ravine. And I'm saying that if we don't find her before dark, she won't survive the night. Jenny's jaw set. Then we search. Where? The clearing. Follow my breadcrumb trail back. There's a stone spiral there. I think that's the focal point. He started walking. Jenny fell into step beside him, Atlas reluctantly following. And if we find her at this clearing, what's the plan? Honestly, I have no idea. They reached the clearing in 15 minutes. It looked different now. The light had shifted, sun sinking toward the horizon, and the spiral of stones cast long shadows across the forest floor. Atlas stopped 10 feet from the tree line, sat down, and refused to move. Well, Jenny said, that's not reassuring. David approached the spiral slowly, every sense alert. The forest around them was quiet again. Not the comfortable evening hush of settling wildlife, but that same oppressive silence he'd felt before. This is it, he said, the boundary. Jenny circled the spiral, examining it from multiple angles. These stones are arranged too perfectly, and look. She pointed. The ground inside the spiral is different, darker, like the vegetation is stunted. She was right. Inside the spiral, no grass grew, no moss, just bare earth, almost black. David pulled out his GPS. The coordinates flickered and jumped, showing his position shifting by hundreds of feet despite his standing still. Just like Sophia had described in her notes. Whatever this place is, Jenny said, it's creating localized reality distortion. This is quantum-level weirdness. Or very old weirdness. Same thing, maybe. David stepped up to the spiral's edge. Immediately, the temperature dropped. He could see frost forming on the stones at his feet. And he could hear something. That same murmuring he'd heard before, like voices in a language older than words. David. Jenny's voice was tight. Your breath. It's not just cold. Look. David looked down. His breath hung in the air, not dissipating. The white vapor twisted, forming shapes, letters, 3 words, written in frozen air. She waits within. Okay, Jenny whispered. Okay, that's... The radio crackled. Both of them jumped. Range 3, dispatch, update. Sophia Chen's credit card was just used at a gas station in Port Angeles, 20 minutes ago. Repeating subject's credit card shows activity outside park. David and Jenny stared at each other. That's impossible, Jenny said. Unless someone stole her card or found her wallet. David keyed his radio. Dispatch, can you get security footage from that station? Working on it, will advise. Port Angeles was 90 miles away. 3 hours by park roads. If someone had taken Sophia's card, that meant... What? That she was dead? That she'd been kidnapped? Or... David looked back at the spiral. Or someone was trying to draw away the search, to make them think she'd left the park. It's a diversion, he said. She's still here. You can't know that. I know. David turned to face Jenny. I'm going in. In where? David, this is a pile of rocks. There's no door. The entity I spoke to said Sophia is beyond the boundary. The only way to reach her is to cross. He gestured at the spiral. This is the crossing point. Jenny grabbed his arm. You're talking about stepping into... what? Another dimension? Based on some cryptic bullshit from a hallucination? You saw her too. I saw something. Doesn't mean I understand it. Jenny, you know me. 11 years in this park. I've dealt with lost hikers, injured climbers, bear attacks, hypothermia, broken bones. I've never, not once, called in something I couldn't explain. David met her eyes. I'm calling it now. There's something in this forest that doesn't fit our models of reality. And Sophia found it. Jenny's radio crackled. K9 unit, this is dispatch. Security footage confirms the gas station transaction was made by an unidentified male, approximately 30 years old, dark jacket. Subject paid cash and left quickly, investigating possible card theft. Copy, Jenny said automatically, but her eyes stayed on David. If you're right, if you step into that thing and vanish, how do I explain that to your wife? To Emma? David thought of his daughter, wearing her soccer captain's armband, his promise never to miss a game. He thought of Anna, waiting for his nightly check-in call. He thought of Robert Chen, gripping a coffee cup with desperate hands. Tell them I did my job, he said quietly. David, if I'm not back in 1 hour, call in emergency services. Full SAR team, FBI if necessary. Tell them... He paused, considering. Tell them there's a hostile actor in the park using psychological warfare tactics. That covers the weird stuff without making you sound crazy. You're assuming you can come back. I'm assuming I have to try. David checked his supplies one final time. GPS still functioned. Radio still worked, though he suspected both would fail the moment he crossed. He activated his emergency beacon. It would ping his location every 5 minutes to search and rescue satellites. Then he stepped onto the first stone of the spiral. The world tilted. Not physically. His body remained upright, his balance intact. But reality itself seemed to shift 90 degrees. Colors inverted briefly, then snapped back. Sound stretched and compressed. For one impossible moment, David could hear conversations from years past. Other hikers on this trail, the whispers of ancient peoples, the groaning of trees before white men had names for them. He took another step. The spiral drew him inward, toward its center. David. Jenny's voice sounded distant now, though she stood just 10 feet away. I can barely see you. He looked down at his hands. They appeared translucent, like colored glass. Another step. The murmuring voices grew louder, coalescing into almost words. Welcome, Walker, turn back while you can. The boundary consumes. She waits. She wails, she warns another step. 3 from the center now. The forest around him had changed. The trees were the same. Sitka spruce, Douglas fir, but older somehow. Impossibly tall. Their trunks bore scars from axes that hadn't been forged yet. Marks from fires that wouldn't burn for centuries. 2 steps from center. David could see Jenny clearly now, but she'd frozen. Mouth open mid-shout, hand outstretched. Atlas mid-bark. Time had stopped for them. Or he had moved beyond time. One step from center. The clearing changed again. Now dozens of figures stood around the spiral, translucent, ghostly. Native peoples in traditional dress. Early loggers with axes. Park rangers from decades past. All of them facing inward, toward the spiral's center. Toward him. They weren't hostile. Just watching. Waiting. David took the final step. The world exploded into fractals of green and brown and gray, kaleidoscoping into patterns that hurt to perceive. He fell, or flew, or stood absolutely still while reality rearranged itself around him. Then, suddenly, silence. David opened his eyes. He stood in the same clearing, but everything had changed. The sky was wrong, neither day nor night, but a perpetual twilight that cast no shadows. The trees grew impossibly dense, their branches interlocking overhead in geometric patterns, and the air felt thick, resistant, like moving through warm honey. "Hello?" His voice fell flat, dead, no echo. "Sophia Chen? Can you hear me?" Movement, 30 feet ahead. David turned. She sat at the base of the grandfather cedar, though this tree was even larger than the one in Sophia's photographs, its trunk the width of a small house. Sophia looked up at him, and relief flooded her face. "Oh, thank God, you're real. You're actually real." She tried to stand, then winced. "My ankle, I think it's actually broken this time." David approached cautiously. "This time? I've seen you 3 times already, or versions of you. They said they were rangers, said they'd found me. But then they'd just disappear, or change, or..." Her voice cracked. "I don't know what's real anymore." This was the real Sophia. David could see it in the exhaustion, the terror, the dirt under her fingernails. Her jacket bore tears and mud stains. Her hair had come loose from its ponytail. Real human wear. "I'm real," David said. "I'm Ranger David Martinez. Your parents sent me." He knelt beside her, assessing her ankle. Swollen, possibly fractured. "Tell me what happened." "I found the grove just like I planned. It was amazing. The cedar formation, the age of the trees. I was documenting everything when I noticed the stones." She gestured weakly at a spiral pattern on the ground around the cedar, identical to the one in the other clearing. They weren't on any survey map. I started measuring them, taking photos, and the forest got angry. Sophia laughed, a brittle sound. "I know how that sounds. But that's what it felt like. The temperature dropped. The light changed. I heard voices telling me to leave. I tried to run back to the trail, but..." She gestured at the impossible forest around them. "I ended up here instead, wherever here is." "You crossed the boundary," David said. "The guardian spirit of this place considers the grove sacred. By measuring it, documenting it, you violated that sanctity." "That's insane. This is a national park. It's meant to be studied." "Not this part." David pulled out his first aid kit, starting to wrap her ankle. "Some places remember the old rules, the old protections. This is one of them. So what? We're trapped here forever, as punishment for scientific research?" "No. The Guardian said you could leave if the forest chooses to release you." "The forest? You're talking about it like it's alive." "Isn't it?" David met her eyes. "Every tree here is hundreds of years old. They've been growing, communicating through root networks, sharing resources, defending against threats. That's a form of life, maybe even consciousness." Sophia stared at him. "You actually believe that? 24 hours ago? No. But I've seen things today I can't explain any other way." He finished securing her ankle. "Can you walk with support?" "I can try." She accepted his arm, struggling to her feet. "But which way? Everything looks the same." David pulled out his compass. The needle spun wildly, unable to find north. His GPS showed no signal. But his emergency beacons still flashed. Wherever they were, satellites could still see them, which meant they were still on Earth, still in physical space. Just adjacent to normal space somehow. "We follow the spiral," he said, gesturing to the stones around the cedar. "If it brought us in, maybe it leads us out." They began walking, following the spiral's curve outward. With each step, the forest shifted slightly. Trees rearranged themselves. The twilight deepened or lightened. Sometimes David glimpsed other figures between the trunks, those ghostly watchers he'd seen before. They never spoke, never approached, just observed. "How long have I been here?" Sophia asked. "It feels like days, but my watch stopped." 23 hours in our world. Could be different here. "And you came alone? Just to find me?" "It's my job." No one's job description includes stepping into an alternate dimension. David smiled despite himself. Probably should update the employee handbook. They walked in silence for a moment. Then Sophia said, "I'm sorry for causing all this trouble. My parents must be terrified. They're waiting for you. Your dad looked ready to tear the forest apart himself." "That sounds like him." Sophia's voice softened. "I just wanted to make my thesis meaningful, to document something no one had really studied before. I didn't know." "How could you know? The Park Service doesn't exactly post 'Beware Sacred Ground' signs." "Maybe they should." The spiral led them through sections of forest that couldn't exist. Trees growing sideways, streams flowing uphill, clearings where flowers bloomed in midwinter. Each impossible sight hammered home the truth. They'd left normal reality behind, but they were still moving, still making progress. After what felt like an hour, David noticed the twilight beginning to change, growing lighter, the trees spacing apart slightly. "We're getting closer," he said. "I can feel it." "Feel what?" "The boundary, the edge between this place and home." Sophia looked around. "It all still looks wrong to me. Trust me." They emerged into a clearing, the same clearing where David had first found the spiral. But this version was overgrown, ancient. The stones had sunk into the earth, barely visible, and standing at the clearing's edge, translucent and terrible, was the Guardian. It wore Sophia's face still, but other faces flickered beneath. David's, Jenny's, 100 others, all the people who'd felt its presence and turned back. "You came," it said. "I am surprised." "I came for her," David replied. "We're leaving now." "Are you?" The Guardian circled them slowly. "She violated sacred ground. That debt must be paid." She didn't know. Ignorance isn't the same as malice. Ignorance is no excuse for desecration. David stepped between Sophia and the Guardian. "Then punish me instead. I knew the legends. I chose to follow her anyway." "David, no." Sophia grabbed his arm. The Guardian tilted its head. "You would trade places? Remain here while she returns? If that's what it takes." For a long moment, the Guardian simply watched them. Then it laughed, that same cedar wind sound. "No trade is necessary. I wanted only to see if you would offer." It gestured to the spiral. "Your willingness to sacrifice proves you understand. Both of you. The forest is not your enemy. It is your responsibility. You, Ranger, who swore to protect it. You, scientist, who sought to understand it." "Then we can leave?" Sophia asked. "If you promise, truly promise, to respect the boundaries you find, to know that some places must remain unmeasured, uncounted, unviolated." The Guardian's many faces merged into one final form, an elderly woman with lines of ancient wisdom. "Will you promise?" David nodded immediately. Sophia hesitated, then said, "I promise. No more research on sacred sites without tribal consultation. No more pushing where I'm not welcome. Then go." The Guardian pointed to the spiral's center. "Step together. Do not separate, and do not look back." David and Sophia moved to the spiral's center, supporting each other. The stones began to glow with soft light. "Wait," David said. "One question. The entity I met earlier said I have old blood. What did that mean?" The guardian smiled. "Your great-grandmother. She walked these forests as a child, before the park existed. She knew how to listen. That gift passes through generations, even when forgotten." It paused. "Your daughter has it too." Before David could respond, the world tilted again. Reality fractured, reformed, stabilized. He stood in the clearing, supporting Sophia. The twilight had vanished, replaced by normal late-afternoon sun. The trees looked like trees again, tall and ancient, but natural. Real, and 10 feet away, Jenny Park stood frozen mid-shout, hand outstretched, mouth open. Time resumed. "Vid!" Jenny finished her yell, then stopped, staring. "Holy shit, you're back, both of you!" Atlas barked once, tail wagging tentatively. David's radio crackled. "Range 3, this is dispatch. Your emergency beacon just reactivated after a 7-minute dead period. Do you need assistance?" 7 minutes. They'd been gone for what felt like hours, but only 7 minutes had passed. David keyed his radio. "Dispatch, Range 3. I have located Sophia Chen. She's ambulatory but needs medical evaluation. Requesting medevac to Trailhead." "Copy that. Outstanding work, Range 3. Medevac en route, ETA 30 minutes. Jenny approached slowly, studying them both. "Where were you? I saw you step into that spiral and just vanish. Completely. No heat signature on thermal. No radio contact. Nothing. Beyond," David said simply. "We were beyond." "Beyond what?" "Everything." The medical helicopter lifted Sophia out 2 hours later, whisking her to Port Angeles General. Ankle fracture, moderate dehydration, minor hypothermia. Nothing permanent. Her parents met her at the hospital, and Robert Chen shook David's hand so hard his knuckles cracked. "Thank you," he said, eyes wet. "Thank you for bringing my daughter home." David filed his official report the next day, carefully noting the facts. Subject located 0. 8 miles from Whispering Grove. Ankle injury. Disoriented from exposure. No mention of guardians or boundaries or impossible places. Jenny backed his report without question. But that night, sitting at his dinner table with Anna and Emma, David told the truth. He told them about the spiral, the guardian, the promise. Emma listened with wide eyes. "So magic is real?" "I don't know about magic," David said. "But there are places in the world older than our understanding. Places we should respect." "Your great-great-grandmother would have nodded at that," Anna said quietly. She knew the family stories. The woman who'd lived with the Quiluti for a time, who'd learned their ways. David had always dismissed them as romanticized history. Now he wasn't so sure. "Can I see the place?" Emma asked. "The boundary?" "Someday," David said. "When you're older. When you're ready to listen." Saturday came. David kept his promise and coached Emma's soccer game. She scored twice, and her team won 4-2. Afterward, as they walked to the car, Emma said, "Dad, do you think I can hear the forest like the guardian said?" David stopped. "Do you want to?" Emma considered seriously. "Yeah, I think so, but only if it wants me to listen." He smiled and pulled her into a hug. "Then we'll go hiking next weekend. Just you and me. I'll show you how to listen properly." 2 weeks later, David returned to the clearing. Alone. The spiral of stones was gone. In its place, a perfect circle of cedar saplings newly planted. At the circle's center, a single stone bore a carving, fresh but made with ancient techniques. A message. The boundary shifts. The guardian remembers. "Walk softly, Ranger. Your daughter will need you." David touched the stone, feeling its warmth despite the autumn chill. Then he turned and walked back to the trail, careful to step lightly, to leave no trace beyond what the forest would forgive. Behind him, the forest whispered. Ahead, the path home lay clear. He chose home. Thank you for reading to the end. If you enjoyed this narrative, consider following for more immersive stories. What's your interpretation of what happened to David in the forest? Was the guardian protecting something sacred, or is there a more rational explanation? I'd love to read your theories in the comments.